The rain battered the roof of the old Victorian house like 1,000 fists, each drop a reminder of the isolation that clung to the place. Ethan Carver stood in the attic, his breath fogging in the damp, frigid air. He'd inherited the house from an uncle he barely knew, an uncle whose death certificate read unknown causes, and whose will had arrived with no explanation, just a set of rusty keys and an address in the middle of nowhere. The attic smelled of mildew and rot, the floorboards groaning under his weight as he navigated the labyrinth of dust-covered relics, cracked porcelain dolls, yellowed letters, a gramophone with a broken horn. And then, there it was, a full-length mirror, its ornate frame carved with twisting vines and eyeless faces, standing alone in the corner like a sentinel. Ethan approached it, drawn by some inexplicable pull. The glass was fogged with age, its surface streaked with grime, but it still reflected him, a man in his 30s, unshaven, with dark circles under his eyes from sleepless nights. He wiped the glass with his sleeve, expecting clarity. Instead, the reflection warped. His face stretched, his eyes sank into black pits, and his mouth twisted into a scream he hadn't made. He stumbled back, heart hammering, but when he looked again, it was just him, ordinary, tired Ethan. "Stupid tricks of the light," he muttered, though his voice trembled. He reached out to touch the frame, and the air grew colder, biting into his skin. The mirror shivered, no vibrated, and a low hum filled the attic like the drone of a distant swarm. He froze as the glass rippled like water, and something moved behind his reflection. Not him, not a shadow. A figure, tall, emaciated, with limbs too long and a head that lolled unnaturally, stood where he should have been alone. Its eyes were hollow, its mouth a jagged tear, and it watched him. Ethan yanked his hand back, and the figure vanished. His reflection returned, but it wasn't right. His eyes were wider, his skin paler, and a faint smirk curled his lips, the smirk he wasn't wearing. He turned away, pulse racing, and the attic was silent again. Too silent. The rain had stopped, but the air felt heavy, as if the house itself held its breath. He didn't sleep that night. Every creak of the house sounded like footsteps, every gust of wind like a whisper. By morning, exhaustion forced him downstairs, but the mirror lingered in his mind. He told himself it was a hallucination, stress, grief, the isolation of this cursed place. Yet when he passed the attic door on his way to the kitchen, it was ajar. He'd locked it the night before. Swallowing hard, he climbed the stairs. The mirror stood exactly where he'd left it, but the glass was clean now, polished to a gleam. His reflection stared back, normal at first. Then it blinked when he didn't. Ethan's knees buckled as his mirrored self stepped closer to the glass, pressing its palms against it. The hum returned, louder, vibrating through his skull, and the reflection spoke in a voice that wasn't his, a wet guttural rasp. "Look again." He ran. Down the stairs, through the house, out into the muddy yard where the air smelled of earth and decay. But the voice followed, echoing inside his head. "Look again." When he dared to glance back at the attic window, he saw it. The figure from the mirror standing there, watching him through the glass. That night, the nightmares began. He saw flashes of things he couldn't explain. A woman clawing at her face until it bled, a child with no eyes laughing in a burning room, a man hanging from a rope that swayed in an empty attic. Each vision ended with the mirror, and each time he woke gasping, the hum was there, faint but real, seeping from the walls. By the third day, he couldn't ignore it. He returned to the attic, armed with a hammer. He'd smash the damn thing and be done with it. But when he raised the weapon, the mirror showed him something new. Not his reflection. Not the figure. A street he recognized, his childhood home. His mother stood on the porch, her face bruised, her eyes pleading. She reached out, and the glass pulsed as her voice broke through. "Ethan, help me." He dropped the hammer. That wasn't a memory. His mother was alive, living 3 states away. He'd spoken to her last week. Yet there she was, trapped in a mirror, her scream cut off as the glass went black. The hum turned into a growl, and the air thickened with the stench of blood. Ethan backed away, but the floorboards cracked beneath him, splintering as if something beneath clawed its way up. He fell, tumbling into darkness, and when he hit the ground, he wasn't in the attic anymore. He was in the house from the mirror, his childhood home. The walls were stained with rust-colored streaks, the air thick with a coppery tang of blood. His mother's voice echoed from upstairs, a desperate wail. "Ethan, it's coming." He ran toward the sound, heart pounding, but the stairs stretched endlessly, each step sinking into wet, spongy wood. Behind him, the hum grew into a roar, and he felt it, something cold and sharp brushing the back of his neck. He turned, and there it was, the emaciated figure, its jagged mouth gaping, its hollow eyes boring into him. It didn't move. It glided, inches above the floor, its limbs twitching like a marionette's. Ethan screamed, bolting up the stairs, but they looped back to the same hallway over and over, until he collapsed, sobbing, as the figure loomed closer. Its voice slithered into his mind. This is only the beginning. He woke in the attic, sprawled on the floor, the hammer beside him. The mirror was intact, reflecting nothing but the empty room. His hands trembled as he checked his phone. March 30th, 2025, 3:17 a.m. 3 days had passed in what felt like hours. His mother's number went straight to voicemail when he called, her cheerful greeting a cruel contrast to the terror in his veins. The hum started again, soft but insistent, and the mirror flickered. This time, it showed him standing in the attic, hammer in hand, but he wasn't alone. The figure stood behind him, its claw-like hand resting on his shoulder. Ethan spun around. Nothing was there. Yet when he looked back at the mirror, the figure smiled, a wide, impossible grin that split its face in two. He didn't smash the mirror that night. He couldn't. Something told him it wouldn't end there. Instead, he sat in the dark, listening to the hum, feeling the house shift around him, knowing that whatever he'd unleashed was only getting started. Ethan didn't leave the attic that night. The air grew colder, the hum a constant pulse in his ears, threading through his thoughts like a parasite. He sat cross-legged on the warped floorboards, staring at the mirror, its surface now still as a frozen pond. His reflection stared back, hollow-eyed and unblinking, but he knew better than to trust it. The figure, the thing with the jagged mouth and hollow eyes, hadn't reappeared, but its presence lingered, a weight pressing against his spine, a whisper just beyond hearing. The attic smelled different now, not just mildew, but something sharper, metallic, like blood seeping through the walls. He hadn't eaten in days, hadn't slept beyond those fractured nightmares, yet hunger and exhaustion felt distant, drowned by the dread that coated his every breath. The mirror had shown him his mother, trapped and screaming, and now her phone was dead. He called her neighbors, her friends. No one had seen her since last week. The rational part of his mind screamed that he should leave, drive to her house, call the police, do something. But the mirror held him here, its pull magnetic, its silence a taunt. He couldn't shake the feeling that if he left, he'd lose her forever. Or worse, bring whatever this was with him. The hammer lay beside him, its head flecked with rust, useless against something he couldn't touch. He tried to research the house online, but the spotty Wi-Fi died hours ago, and his phone's battery drained faster than it should have, flickering to 3% despite a full charge that morning. The date still read March 30th, 2025, but the clock jumped erratically, 3:17 a.m., then 4:02, then back to 3:17. Time was breaking, and he was breaking with it. A sound jolted him from his stupor, a slow, deliberate creak from the floor below. The house had been alive with noises since he arrived, but this was different, rhythmic, purposeful, like footsteps climbing the stairs. Ethan's mouth went dry. He grabbed the hammer and stood, his legs trembling, eyes darting between the mirror and the attic door. The knob rattled, a sharp metallic clink, and then silence. He held his breath, waiting, praying it was just the wind. The door flew open with a bang, slamming against the wall, so hard the hinges groaned. Nothing stood there, just the dark mouth of the stairwell, swallowing the faint light from downstairs. Ethan edged toward it, hammer raised, peering into the shadows. The air shifted, carrying a stench, wet fur decay, and something sickly sweet, like rotting flowers. Then he heard it, a low, guttural chuckle, not from the stairs but from behind him. He spun around. The mirror was no longer empty. His reflection stood there, hammer in hand, mimicking his pose, but its head was tilted at an impossible angle, neck bent backward until the chin pointed to the ceiling. Its eyes rolled white, and blood trickled from its mouth, pooling at its feet in the glass. Ethan's stomach lurched as the reflection had dropped the hammer and clawed at its own face, nails digging into flesh, peeling it back in wet, glistening strips. The hum surged into a scream, and the reflection's voice, his voice, rasped through the attic. "You can't stop it." Ethan swung the hammer at the mirror, desperation overriding fear. The glass shattered with a sound like breaking bones, shards exploding outward, slicing his arms, his face. He fell back, blood dripping onto the floor, the hum abruptly silent. For a moment, he thought he'd won. The frame stood empty, jagged edges glinting in the dim light. He laughed, a shaky, hysterical sound, relief flooding him. Then the shards moved. Tiny slivers of glass twitched across the floor like insects, skittering toward each other, reforming with a sickening crunch. Within seconds, the mirror was whole again, pristine, reflecting the attic as if nothing had happened. Ethan's reflection was gone, replaced by the figure, the emaciated thing with its lolling head and hollow eyes. It didn't move, didn't speak, just watched him, its presence a promise of something worse to come. He scrambled to his feet and ran, down the stairs, through the house, the walls seeming to pulse as he passed. The front door wouldn't budge, locked, though he hadn't touched it. Windows wouldn't break. The glass bent under his fists like rubber. Panic clawed at his chest as he raced to the kitchen, searching for anything, a knife, a phone, a way out. The hum followed, softer now, mocking him. On the counter, his phone buzzed to life, screen glowing despite the dead battery. A video played automatically, grainy footage of his mother's house, the camera panning across her living room. The furniture was overturned, the walls smeared with dark streaks. She sat in the center, bound to a chair, her face bruised and tear-streaked. She wasn't alone. Shadows moved around her, tall, thin shapes with twitching limbs. One leaned close, its jagged mouth inches from her ear, and she screamed, the sound cutting off as the video looped. Ethan dropped the phone, while rising in his throat. The hum grew louder, and the kitchen lights flickered. He turned, and there it was, the mirror standing in the doorway, though he'd left it in the attic. His reflection was back, but it wasn't him anymore. His skin was gray, his eyes black pits, and his mouth stretched into a grin that split his face ear to ear. It raised a hand, beckoning him closer. He didn't move, couldn't. The floor beneath him softened, sinking like wet clay, and cold fingers brushed his ankles, fingers that weren't there when he looked down. The reflection stepped out of the mirror, its movements jerky, unnatural, like a puppet on frayed strings. It stopped inches from him, its breath a rancid gust against his face, and whispered, "She's waiting." The lights died. Darkness swallowed the room, and the hum became a roar, vibrating through his bones. Something grabbed his wrist, icy, sharp, real, and yanked him forward. He screamed, thrashing, but the grip tightened, dragging him toward the mirror. The glass pulsed, a black void opening within it. He saw her, his mother, reaching out, her face dissolving into a mass of writhing shadows. He clawed at the floor, nails splintering, but the force was relentless. The last thing he felt was the mirror's edge, cold and slick, as he was pulled inside. The kitchen was silent again, empty except for the mirror, its surface reflecting nothing but the flickering light. Outside, the rain started again, drumming against the house. But inside, something else drummed, a heartbeat, faint and erratic, echoing from the glass. Ethan didn't hit the ground. There was no impact, no jolt, just a sudden suffocating stillness as the mirror swallowed him whole. The air was thick, viscous, like breathing through wet cotton. It tasted of ash and rust. His screams died in his throat, muffled by the weight of the darkness pressing against him. He flailed, hands grasping at nothing, until his fingers brushed something solid, cold, smooth, unyielding. Glass. He was inside the mirror, trapped behind its surface, the world beyond a distorted blur of shadows and muted light. Panic surged, and he pounded against the glass, each strike sending ripples through the void. His reflection should have been there, staring back, but the surface showed only the empty kitchen, the flickering bulb casting jagged shadows across the floor. He pressed his face to the glass, straining to see, and that's when he heard it, a faint sob, trembling and broken, coming from behind him. He turned, though every movement felt like wading through tar. The darkness parted, revealing a space that shouldn't exist, a vast, cavernous chamber with walls of cracked stone, slick with something dark and glistening. The ceiling stretched impossibly high, lost in a haze of shifting mist, and the floor was a mosaic of shattered glass, cutting into his boots with every step. In the center stood his mother, still bound to the chair from the video, her head bowed, her sobs echoing in the hollow expanse. "Mom!" Ethan's voice cracked as he ran to her, ignoring the pain in his feet, the shards slicing through leather and skin. She didn't look up. Her hands were tied with ropes that pulsed like veins, black and alive, burrowing into her wrists. He knelt beside her, fumbling with the knots, but they tightened under his touch, drawing a whimper from her lips. "Mom, it's me. I'm here. I'll get you out." Her head snapped up, and Ethan froze. Her eyes were gone, empty sockets weeping blood that streaked down her cheeks like tears. Her mouth opened, but no words came, just a low, guttural moan that vibrated through the chamber. The ropes slithered higher, wrapping around her arms, her throat, and she convulsed, her body jerking as if something inside fought to break free. "No, no, no!" Ethan yanked at the ropes, his hands slick with her blood, but they wouldn't budge. The air grew heavier, the mist thickening into a shroud that coiled around them. A shadow loomed behind her, tall, emaciated, its limbs twitching, its jagged mouth gaping in a silent scream. The figure from the mirror. It didn't move closer, didn't need to. Its presence was a blade against his mind, cutting deeper with every second. "Help me," Ethan shouted, turning to it, desperation choking him. "Let her go. Take me instead." The figure tilted its head, a slow, deliberate motion, and the chamber shuddered. The glass floor cracked beneath him, fissures spreading like spider webs, and a sound rose from below, a chorus of whispers, overlapping, unintelligible, yet filled with malice. The figure raised a claw-like hand, and the ropes around his mother tightened, snapping her head back with a sickening crunch. She went still. The whispers stopped. Ethan stared, breath hitching, as her body slumped forward, lifeless. "No," he reached for her, but the figure glided between them, its hollow eyes boring into his. Its voice slithered into his skull, wet and jagged. "She's not yours anymore." The floor gave way. Ethan fell, glass shards tearing at him as he plummeted into darkness. He landed hard, breath knocked from his lungs, in a space that reeked of damp earth and decay. The chamber was gone, replaced by a narrow tunnel, its walls rough-hewn stone dripping with black ichor. His mother's chair sat empty at the far end, ropes dangling like severed limbs. Above it, the mirror hung on the wall, its surface rippling like water. Ethan staggered to his feet, blood dripping from his hands, his legs trembling. The mirror showed the attic now, the real world just beyond his reach. He could see the hammer lying on the floor, the open door, the rain-streaked window. Freedom. He lunged for it, slamming his fists against the glass, but it didn't break. It bent, flexing under his blows, mocking him with its resilience. The sound behind him, a wet, dragging scrape. He turned, and his mother stood there, but it wasn't her. Her skin was gray, her eyeless sockets fixed on him, her mouth stretched into a grin that mirrored the figure's. She moved toward him, limbs jerking unnaturally, the rope still clinging to her like parasites. "Ethan," she rasped, her voice a distorted echo of the woman he knew. "Why didn't you save me?" "I tried," he screamed, backing against the mirror. "I tried." She didn't stop, her hands reaching for him, nails blackened and sharp. The tunnel walls pulsed, the ichor dripping faster, pooling around his feet. He swung at her a wild, desperate punch, and his fist sank into her chest, through flesh that crumbled like ash. She laughed, a high keening sound, and dissolved into a swarm of black flies that buzzed around him, stinging his skin, burrowing into his ears. He clawed at his face, stumbling toward the mirror, the flies' hum blending with a familiar drone that haunted him. The glass cleared, showing the attic again, but now he saw himself, his real self, standing there, staring into the mirror with wide, unblinking eyes. He pounded on the glass, screaming his own name, but the Ethan outside didn't move. Didn't hear. The flies swarmed thicker, and the tunnel trembled, stones cracking as something massive shifted in the darkness beyond. The Ethan in the attic turned away, walking toward the door, leaving him behind. "No, don't leave me," he yelled, but the glass was cold, unyielding. The mirror flickered, and the figure appeared beside his trapped self, its claw resting on his shoulder. "You're home now," it whispered, and the tunnel erupted in a deafening roar. Ethan spun around as the walls split open, revealing a void filled with writhing shapes, bodies, faces, things that weren't human, all twisting together in a mass of flesh and shadow. His mother's form emerged from it, eyeless, grinning, her voice a chorus, "Stay with us." The swarm of flies surged, dragging him backward, away from the mirror, into the chaos. He fought, kicking, screaming, but the void swallowed him, the mirror shrinking to a pinpoint of light. The last thing he saw was his own face in the glass, not the Ethan who'd walked away, but the one trapped with him, smiling that same jagged, impossible grin. The void didn't end. It stretched, elastic and infinite, a suffocating womb of shadow and sound. Ethan thrashed against the swarm of flies, their stings like needles piercing his skin, their buzzing a relentless assault on his sanity. His mother's voice, or what had stolen it, echoed through the darkness, a warped lullaby. "Stay with us, Ethan. Stay." The words burrowed into his mind, heavy and sticky, rooting themselves in the cracks of his thoughts. He couldn't tell if he was falling or floating. Direction meant nothing here, only the pull of something deeper, something hungry. Then, abruptly, the flies were gone. Silence crashed over him, so absolute it felt like a physical blow. He was standing, no kneeling, on a surface that shimmered faintly, a sea of black glass stretching in every direction. Above, the void churned, a roiling mass of shadows and half-seen faces, their mouths moving in unison, though no sound escaped. Ethan's hands pressed against the glass, leaving smears of blood from cuts he didn't remember receiving. His reflection stared back, but it wasn't right. His eyes were too wide, his skin too pale, and that grin, that jagged, unnatural grin, split his face like a wound. He stood, legs shaking, and the reflection stood with him, mirroring every move. "You're not me," he whispered, voice hoarse. The reflection's grin widened, and it shook its head, a slow, deliberate denial. Ethan stepped back, and it stepped forward, pressing its hands against the underside of the glass. The surface rippled, and its fingers pushed through, clawing upward, black nails glinting like obsidian. Ethan ran. The glass cracked beneath his feet, each step sending fractures radiating outward, but the expanse never ended. Behind him, the sound of shattering followed, a sharp staccato rhythm as his reflection broke free. He didn't look back, he couldn't. The air grew colder, sharper, slicing into his lungs with every breath. The void above pulsed, and tendrils of shadow dripped down like tar, pooling around him, slowing his steps. A voice, not his mother's, but something older, deeper, rolled through the darkness. "You brought us here." Ethan stumbled, the words a weight on his chest. "What?" he gasped, spinning around. The reflection was closer now, gliding across the glass, its movements fluid where his were frantic. Its mouth opened, and the voice came again, layered with 1,000 others. "You looked. You broke the seal." "I didn't mean to," he shouted, but the reflection only laughed, a wet gurgling sound that echoed across the glass. The shadows thickened, coalescing into shapes, the emaciated figure with its lolling head, his mother with her eyeless grin, and others, strangers with twisted limbs and hollow faces, all watching him, all smiling. They didn't move, didn't chase, just stood there as the reflection closed the distance. Ethan swung at it, fist connecting with its jaw, but felt like punching water. His hands sank in, and the reflection's flesh rippled, reforming around his arm. It grabbed him, cold fingers digging into his wrist, and yanked him down. His knees hit the glass, and it cracked beneath him, a jagged hole opening into nothingness. The reflection leaned close, its breath rancid, its eyes black pits. "Look," it hissed, forcing his head toward the hole. He didn't want to, but his eyes betrayed him. Below, he saw the attic, the real attic, bathed in dim light. He was there, standing in front of the mirror, hammer in hand, staring blankly at his reflection. But it wasn't him. The Ethan in the attic moved stiffly, mechanically, like a puppet. He turned, walked to the door, and descended the stairs, leaving the mirror behind. Ethan screamed, pounding against the glass, but the other him didn't falter, didn't hear. The reflection tightened its grip. "That's me now," it whispered, its voice a mockery of his own. "And you're here." The glass beneath him shattered completely, and he fell, the reflection's laughter chasing him into the dark. He landed in water, icy, black, and endless, his body sinking as the current pulled him deeper. He kicked, lungs burning, but the surface was gone, replaced by a ceiling of glass above him, reflecting the void. Through the water, he saw them, dozens of figures, pale and bloated, floating just beyond reach. Their eyes were open, their mouths frozen in silent screams, their hands clawing at nothing. Among them was his mother, her eyeless face turned toward him, her grin unwavering. The current dragged him closer, and her hand shot out, fingers wrapping around his ankle. He thrashed, but she pulled him down, her voice bubbling through the water. "You left me." "I didn't." He tried to scream, but the water flooded his mouth, choking him. The other figures converged, their hands grasping, tearing at his clothes, his skin. Their voices joined hers, a cacophony of accusations. "You looked. You broke it. You brought us." Ethan clawed at the water, desperation fueling him, and his hand broke the surface. Not water, but glass again, the same black expanse. He pulled himself up, gasping, only to find a reflection waiting, perched like a vulture. It tilted its head, mimicking his mother's eyeless stare. "They've been waiting too long," it said, and the glass trembled as the void above split open. A massive shape descended, a writhing mass of limbs and mouths, eyes blinking in and out of existence, its flesh a tapestry of decay. It wasn't one thing, but many fused together, screaming as one. Ethan scrambled back, but the glass softened, sucking at his hands, his knees. The reflection stood, towering over him, and raised a hand. The mass descended faster, its mouths gaping, and Ethan saw himself in them. Hundreds of Ethans trapped, screaming, their faces peeling away to reveal the same jagged grin. "You're part of us now," the reflection said, and the glass gave way, pulling him into the mass. He didn't fall far. He landed on solid ground, the attic floor, the mirror in front of him. He was back, or so he thought. The hammer was gone, the door was shut, and the room was silent. He touched his face, his hands, expecting wounds, but his skin was intact. Relief flooded him, a fragile, fleeting thing, until he looked into the mirror. It wasn't his face staring back. It was the reflection's, gray, grinning, its black eyes glinting with triumph. Ethan raised a hand, and the reflection didn't move. He screamed, but the sound came from the glass, not his throat. He was still trapped, watching as the thing wearing his body turned away, its steps slow and deliberate, heading for the door. Outside the mirror, the house creaked, and the hum began again, louder, hungrier. Ethan pounded on a glass, his reflection's laughter echoing in his skull, as the thing that wasn't him disappeared into the shadows of the house. Ethan's fists ached, bruised and bloodied from hammering against the glass, but the mirror didn't yield. It held him fast, a prisoner in his own reflection, forced to watch as the thing that wore his face moved through the house. The attic was dim, the air thick with dust and the faint tang of blood, but beyond the mirror, the world shifted under the imposter's steps. The Ethan outside, the other Ethan, walked with a purpose Ethan didn't recognize, its movements too smooth, too deliberate, as if it had rehearsed this moment for centuries. He couldn't hear what it heard, couldn't feel what it felt, but the mirror showed him everything. The other Ethan descended the stairs, each creak of the wood a taunt, and entered the kitchen. The phone still lay on the counter, its screen dark now, the video of his mother silenced. The imposter picked it up, turning it over in his hands, before dropping it with a casual flick, letting it shatter against the tile. Ethan screamed inside the glass, but the sound was swallowed, trapped in the void behind him. The imposter paused, tilting its head as if listening, and Ethan felt a chill crawl up his spine. Could it hear him? Sense him? Its lips curled into that jagged grin, the one that split its face too wide, and it turned toward the mirror, though it couldn't see him. "Not yet. You're loud," it said, its voice a perfect mimicry of Ethan's, but laced with something darker, something wet and ancient. "Keep screaming. It feeds us." Ethan's breath hitched. The imposter stepped closer, its reflection filling the glass, and for a moment, their eyes met, his real ones, trapped and frantic against the black pits of the thing wearing his skin. It raised a hand, pressing it to the mirror's surface, and the glass pulsed under Ethan's palms, warm and alive. "You'll see soon," it whispered, then turned away, leaving the kitchen with a stride that mocked his own. He pounded harder, desperation clawing at him, but the mirror only trembled, mocking his efforts. The void behind him stirred, the shadows shifting, and he felt them, the others, the writhing mass of limbs and mouths, their presence a pressure against his mind. His mother's eyeless face flickered in the darkness, her grin unwavering, her voice a whisper, "You can't leave." Ethan spun around, searching for her, but the void was empty, save for the faint hum that pulsed like a heartbeat. The mirror flickered, pulling his attention back. The imposter was in the living room now, standing before the fireplace. The hearth was cold, ash scattered across the bricks, but the thing knelt, running its fingers through the dust. It muttered something, words Ethan couldn't hear but felt in his bones, a cadence that twisted the air. The ash swirled, rising in tendrils that coiled around its hands, and the room darkened, the shadows stretching unnaturally across the walls. Ethan pressed his face to the glass, straining to understand. The imposter stood, holding something, a shard of mirror, small and jagged, glinting in the dim light. It wasn't from the attic mirror. This one was different, its edges stained with something dark and crusted. The thing smiled, pressing the shard to its palm. Ethan's palm, and blood welled up, dripping onto the floor. The house groaned, a deep, resonant sound, and the shadows surged, swallowing the room. When the darkness cleared, the imposter was gone, but the mirror showed Ethan a new scene. A front yard, rain lashing the muddy ground, the trees bending under a wind that howled like a living thing. The imposter stood there, barefoot, the shard still clutched in its hand. It raised its head, staring at the attic window, and Ethan realized with a jolt that it was looking at him. Not the mirror in the living room, but the one trapping him upstairs. The thing laughed, a sound that cut through the storm and drove the shard into the earth. The ground split, a jagged fissure racing toward the house, and the mirror shuddered, the glass cracking under Ethan's hands. He stumbled back as the void behind him roared, the shadows lunging forward, tendrils wrapping around his arms, his legs. "No," he screamed, pulling against them, but they were relentless, dragging him deeper into the darkness. The mirror flickered again, and he saw the imposter enter the house, its steps unhurried, its grin unwavering. It climbed the stairs, each footfall a thunderclap in Ethan's skull, and stopped before the attic door. The shadows tightened their grip, and Ethan felt his body stretch, his bones creaking as the void pulled harder. The imposter pushed the door open, and there it was, the mirror standing alone, reflecting nothing but the empty attic. It stepped closer, raising the bloodied shard, and scratched something into the glass, a symbol angular and sharp, glowing faintly red. The void convulsed, and Ethan's vision blurred as the shadows tore at him, their voices a deafening chorus, "You're ours." He clawed at the glass, nails splintering, but it was too late. The imposter pressed its hand to the symbol, and the mirror flared, a blinding light that seared his eyes. When the light faded, Ethan was still trapped, but the attic was different. The walls were streaked with black ichor, the floor littered with shards of glass that twitched like living things. The imposter was gone, but its presence lingered, a weight in the air. Ethan sank to his knees, the shadows loosening their grip, and stared at the mirror. The symbol pulsed, a heartbeat in the glass, and beyond it he saw the imposter again. Outside, walking down the road, its silhouette fading into the rain. He didn't know how long he knelt there, lost in the hum, until a sound broke through, a voice faint and trembling, calling his name. Ethan, it wasn't his mother's. It was a man's, cracked with age and fear. He turned, and the void parted, revealing a figure, not the emaciated thing, not his mother, but an old man hunched and frail, his eyes wide with terror. "You have to stop it," the man rasped, his hand shaking as he reached out. "It's not done with you." Before Ethan could speak, the man's face split open, a jagged grin tearing through his flesh, and the shadows surged, swallowing him whole. The mirror flared again, and Ethan saw the imposter stop, turn, and look back at the house, look back at him. Its grin widened, and it raised the shard, blood dripping from its hand, as the rain turned red around it. The hum grew louder, the glass trembling, and Ethan felt it. A shift, a crack in the void, a chance. He lunged for the mirror, hand slamming against the symbol, and the world tilted, the shadows screaming as something gave way. The mirror didn't break. It bent, folding inward under Ethan's hands like a sheet of molten glass. The symbol pulsed beneath his palms, searing his skin with a heat that wasn't fire, but something older, something alive. The shadows shrieked, their tendrils lashing at him, but he didn't let go. He couldn't. The hum was deafening now, a roar that drowned out his own heartbeat, and the void shuddered as if it were tearing itself apart. For a moment, he saw it. The attic beyond, the real world, flickering like a mirage through the warped glass. Ethan. The old man's voice cut through the chaos, sharp and desperate, though he was gone, swallowed by the shadows. Push. Ethan didn't know what it meant, but instinct took over. He leaned into the mirror, his entire weight against it, and the glass stretched further, thinning until it was a membrane, a fragile barrier between him and freedom. The symbol flared, red light bleeding into the void, and the shadows recoiled, their screams turning to a high-pitched wail. Then it snapped. The mirror shattered, not into shards, but into a burst of liquid light that engulfed him. Ethan fell forward, tumbling through a rush of cold air, and hit the attic floor hard. The impact drove the breath from his lungs, and he lay there, gasping, the hum fading to a faint buzz in his ears. The attic was silent, the air heavy with the stench of blood and rot, but he was out. He was real again. He rolled onto his back, staring at the ceiling, its cracked beams swimming in his vision. His hands stung, blistered where the symbol had burned him, and his body ached as if he'd been torn apart and stitched back together. The mirror stood above him, intact once more, its surface dark and still. No reflection. No shadows. Just an empty, mocking void. Ethan scrambled to his feet, heart pounding, and backed away. The attic door was open, the stairwell beyond a black maw, but he didn't care. He needed out, away from this thing, this house. He stumbled down the stairs, nearly falling, the walls seeming to lean inward as he passed. The living room was a mess, furniture overturned, ash scattered from the fireplace, the phone in pieces on the kitchen floor. The front door hung ajar, rain blowing in, and Ethan ran for it, the muddy yard slick under his boots. The storm raged outside, wind howling through the trees, but the rain wasn't red anymore, just water, cold and relentless. He stopped, chest heaving, and looked back at the house. The attic window stared down at him like an eye, dark and unblinking. The imposter was gone, or so he hoped, but its absence felt like a trap, a pause before the next strike. He didn't have a plan, didn't know where to go, but he started walking, following the dirt road that wound away from the house. His phone was dead, his car keys lost somewhere in the chaos, but he couldn't stay. Not with that thing out there, wearing his face, carrying that shard. The old man's words echoed in his mind. It's not done with you. Who was he? What did he know? Ethan's thoughts spun, fractured by exhaustion and fear, but one thing was clear. The mirror wasn't finished. It had let him go, but it wasn't defeated. The road stretched on, swallowed by fog, and the hum returned, soft at first, a whisper on the wind. Ethan froze, scanning the trees, the shadows twisting in the storm. Then he saw it, a figure in the distance, standing motionless, its silhouette too familiar. The imposter. It didn't move, didn't approach, just watched him, the shard glinting in its hand. Ethan's stomach dropped. He turned to run, but the ground shifted, soft and sinking, and he stumbled, falling to his knees. The hum grew louder, and the fog thickened, curling around him like fingers. He heard footsteps, slow, deliberate, crunching through the mud, and the imposter's voice, his voice, slithered through the air. You can't outrun yourself. Ethan clawed at the ground, pulling himself up and ran, blind in the fog, branches snapping against his face. The footsteps followed, unhurried, relentless, a predator savoring the chase. He didn't know how long he ran, minutes, hours, until the fog parted, revealing a gas station, its neon sign flickering in the rain. Relief surged, fragile and fleeting, as he staggered toward it. The door chime rang as he burst inside, dripping and wild-eyed. The clerk, a middle-aged man with a bored expression, barely looking up from his magazine. "You okay, buddy?" he asked, voice flat. "No," Ethan rasped, leaning against the counter, his breath ragged. "I need a phone. Someone's after me." The clerk raised an eyebrow, sliding a corded phone across the counter. Ethan dialed his mother's number, hand shaking, praying for an answer. It rang once, twice, then clicked to voicemail, her cheerful greeting, a knife in his chest. He tried again, then called the police, stammering through an explanation. The house, the mirror, the thing with his face. The clerk watched him, skepticism hardening his gaze, but the dispatcher promised to send a car. Ethan sank to the floor, the hum still buzzing in his ears, faint but persistent. The clerk offered him coffee, lukewarm and bitter, and he clutched it, the heat grounding him. "Rough night, huh?" the clerk said, flipping a page. Ethan nodded, too exhausted to reply, his eyes darting to the window. The fog pressed against the glass, thick and alive, and he swore he saw a shadow move within it. Minutes dragged by, the storm rattling the building, until headlights pierced the gloom, a police cruiser pulling into the lot. Ethan stood, relief warring with dread, and stepped outside as two officers climbed out, their faces stern under the rain. "You the one who called?" the taller one asked, his hand resting on his holster. "Yes," Ethan said, voice trembling. "There's someone out there. It looks like me, but it's not. It's from a house, the mirror." He stopped, their expressions shifting from concern to confusion, then suspicion. The shorter officer shone a flashlight in his face, blinding him. "Slow down, sir. You're not making sense. Let's start with your name." "Ethan Carver," he said, squinting. "Please, you have to believe me. It's dangerous. It's still out there." The officers exchanged a glance, and the taller one stepped closer, his tone softening. "All right, Ethan. Why don't you come with us? We'll check out this house, figure out what's going on." Ethan nodded, following them to the cruiser, the hum growing louder in his skull. He slid into the back seat, the door locking with a heavy click, and the officers climbed in front. The engine roared to life, and they pulled onto the road, headlights cutting through the fog. Ethan leaned back, exhaustion pulling at him, until he glanced at the rearview mirror. The taller officer's reflection stared back, not at the road, but at him. Its eyes were black pits, its mouth splitting into that jagged grin. Ethan's heart stopped. He lunged for the door, but it wouldn't budge, the lock unyielding. The shorter officer turned, his face the same, gray, grinning, inhuman. "You didn't think it was that easy, did you?" they said in unison, their voices his own. The cruiser accelerated, veering off the road into the fog, and the hum swallowed everything as the world dissolved into darkness. The cruiser didn't stop, it shifted. The hum swallowed Ethan's scream as the world outside the windows dissolved, the fog and rain replaced by a tunnel of writhing shadows. The seats beneath him pulsed, warm and slick, like the flesh of something alive, and the air grew thick with the stench of decay. The officers, or whatever they were, didn't turn, didn't speak, their grinning faces fixed in a rearview mirror, black eyes glinting with a hunger that made his skin crawl. Ethan clawed at the door, the handle slick with sweat, but it fused into the frame, trapping him inside. "Where are you taking me?" he shouted, voice cracking. The imposters didn't answer, but the hum surged, vibrating through the car, and the taller one's head tilted unnaturally, a slow twist that cracked its neck with a wet snap. "Home," it rasped, its voice a distorted echo of his own, layered with something ancient and guttural. The shorter one laughed, a high keening sound that burrowed into Ethan's skull, and the cruiser lurched, the tunnel bending around them like a throat swallowing them whole. The windows showed nothing now, just a void that pulsed with faint, sickly light. Ethan pressed himself against the seat, heart hammering, searching for a weapon, an escape, anything. His hands brushed something cold beneath him, a shard of glass jagged and stained, identical to the one the imposter had used. He gripped it, the edges biting into his palm, blood welling up, and a jolt of pain cleared his mind. He had to fight. He had to get out. He lunged forward, driving the shard into the taller imposter's neck. It sank in with a sickening squelch, black ichor sprang across the dashboard, but the thing didn't flinch. It turned, grin widening, and pulled the shard free, the wound sealing instantly. "You don't learn," it said, tossing the shard back to him. Ethan caught it reflexively, the blood on it warm and sticky, and the shorter imposter giggled, its head lolling back to stare at him upside down. "Keep trying. It's fun." The car shuddered, and the tunnel opened into a vast, cavernous space, stone walls towering into darkness. The floor a sea of cracked glass that reflected the cruiser's headlights in fractured, dizzying patterns. The vehicle slowed, rolling to a stop, and the doors clicked open. Ethan didn't wait, he bolted, tumbling onto the glass. the shards cutting into his hands and knees. The air was frigid, heavy with a coppery tang of blood, and the hum was everywhere, a living thing that pulsed through the ground. He ran, ignoring the pain, the cavern stretching endlessly before him. Behind, the impostors stepped out, their footsteps a slow, deliberate crunch against the glass. They didn't chase, didn't need to. Their presence was a weight, a promise that he couldn't escape. Ethan glanced back, and his stomach dropped. There weren't two now, there were dozens, each wearing his face, their grins splitting wider, their black eyes fixed on him. They moved in unison, a grotesque parade, their voices overlapping. "You're home." The cavern trembled, and the glass beneath him cracked, fissures spreading like veins. Ethan stumbled, falling hard, and the mirror appeared, full-length, ornate, its frame crawling with eyeless faces. It hadn't been there a moment ago, but now it stood before him, its surface rippling like water. He saw himself in it, not the impostors, but him trapped again, pounding on a glass, his mouth open in a silent scream. The reflection was him, the real him, still caught in the void. "No," he whispered, crawling back, but the impostors closed in, their shadows stretching across the glass. The tallest one, the first, knelt beside him, its claw-like hand gripping his chin, forcing him to look into the mirror. "See?" It hissed, its breath rancid. "You never left." The reflection's eyes widened, pleading, and Ethan felt it, a tug, a pull, as if his soul were splitting, one half trapped, the other here, bleeding on the glass. The cavern roared, and the mirror flared, light pouring from it, blinding him. When it faded, he was alone, or so he thought. The impostors were gone, the cruiser vanished, but the mirror remained, reflecting the cavern now, empty except for him. He stood, trembling, and approached it, drawn by a compulsion he couldn't fight. His reflection stared back, normal at first, then it blinked when he didn't. It raised a hand, pressing it to the glass, and Ethan mirrored it, their palms aligning. The glass pulsed, and the reflection spoke, its voice soft, almost tender. "Let me out." Ethan yanked his hand back, heart racing, but the reflection didn't move, didn't grin, just watched him, its eyes his own, filled with a desperation he recognized. "Please," it said. "I'm you. The real you. They took me, and you're the echo." Ethan's mind reeled. Was it true? Had the mirror swapped them, trapped the real him while he, the imposter, wandered free? He shook his head, backing away. "You're lying," he spat, but doubt gnawed at him. The reflection's face twisted, tears streaking its cheeks, his cheeks. It pounded on a glass, the sound muffled but real. "Ethan, don't leave me here." He turned to run, but the cavern shifted, the walls closing in, the glass floor buckling. The hum surged, and the impostors reappeared, not dozens, but hundreds, surrounding him, their grins a sea of jagged teeth. The mirror flickered, and the reflection vanished, replaced by his mother, eyeless and grinning, her voice a chorus, "You're both ours." The impostors lunged, hands clawing at him, and Ethan swung the shard, slashing wildly, black ichor spraying as they fell back. The mirror pulsed again, and the cavern split, a fissure opening beneath him. He fell, the shard slipping from his grip, and landed in water, black scentless. He thrashed, lungs burning, and broke the surface, gasping. He was in a basement now, the house's basement, its stone walls slick with mold, the air dank and suffocating. The mirror hung on the wall, reflecting the room, and Ethan saw himself, what real? Relief flooded him, fragile and fleeting, until he heard it, a shuffle, a scrape from the shadows. The imposter stepped into the light, the shard back in its hand, its grin wider than ever. "Welcome back," it said, and the basement door slammed shut, locking with a heavy thud. The hum grew, the walls trembling, and Ethan realized the truth. He hadn't escaped. He'd only fallen deeper. The imposter raised the shard, and the mirror flared, showing not the basement, but the attic, the living room, the yard. All at once, a kaleidoscope of the house, each scene filled with more imposters, all wearing his face, all grinning. "We're everywhere," it whispered, and the shadows surged, swallowing the light. The basement didn't stay still. The walls shuddered, stone cracking as if the house itself were inhaling, exhaling, alive. Ethan pressed himself against the damp floor, the cold seeping into his bones, his breath fogging in the dim light cast by the mirror. The imposter stood before him, its grin a fixed mask, the shard in its hand dripping black ichor that hissed as it hit the ground. The hum was no longer a sound. It was a force, vibrating through the air, the walls, his skull, sinking with the frantic thud of his heart. "You can't run," it said, his voice soft and mocking. "You're part of it now." It stepped closer, the shard glinting, and Ethan scrambled back, his hands slipping on the slick stone. The basement stretched, the shadows lengthening, and the mirror pulsed, its surface rippling like a heartbeat. He glanced at it, and the kaleidoscope of images shifted. Dozens of Ethans, all him, all not him, scattered across the house. In the attic, clawing at the glass. In the kitchen, laughing over the shattered phone. In the yard, burying the shard in the mud. Each one grinned, their black eyes fixed on him through the mirror. "What are you?" Ethan rasped, his throat raw. The imposter tilted its head, a slow, unnatural motion, and crouched beside him, close enough that he could smell its breath, rancid like rotting meat. "I'm you," it said, its grin splitting wider, revealing teeth that were too sharp, too many. "The you that was waiting. The you that's always been here." He swung at it, a wild, desperate punch, but his fist passed through its face, the flesh dissolving into smoke before reforming. It laughed, a sound that echoed through the basement, and the walls groaned louder, cracks spiderwebbing upward. The floor buckled, and Ethan fell, tumbling into a shallow pit that hadn't been there a moment ago. Water seeped in, black oily, stinking of decay, and something brushed his leg, cold and slimy, before retreating into the murk. The imposter loomed above him, its silhouette framed by the mirror's sickly light. "The house likes you," it said, tapping the shard against its palm. "It's been empty too long." The water rose, lapping at his waist, and Ethan clawed at the edges of the pit, pulling himself up. The walls pulsed faster, the cracks glowing faintly red, and he realized they weren't random. They formed patterns, symbols like the one the imposter had carved into the mirror, a language he couldn't read but felt in his bones. He staggered to his feet, the water clinging to him, heavy and alive, and ran for the basement stairs. The door was still shut, but it rattled now, as if something on the other side fought to get in or out. The imposter didn't follow, just watched, its grin unwavering. "Go ahead," it called. "See what's waiting." Ethan reached the door, hands trembling as he gripped the knob. It turned cold and slick, and the door swung open with a groan, revealing not the house but a hallway endless, narrow, its walls lined with mirrors. Each one reflected him, but none were right. One had no eyes, another clawed at its face, a third grinned with blood dripping from its mouth. The hum surged, and the reflections moved, stepping out of the glass, their footsteps a cacophony that shook the floor. He slammed the door shut, heart pounding, and turned back. The imposter was gone, but the pit had widened, the black water spilling across the basement, pooling around a mirror. The surface flared, and his mother appeared, eyeless gray, her grin a mirror of the imposter's. "Ethan," she whispered, her voice a chorus of overlapping tones. "Come home." The water surged, dragging him toward the mirror, and he fought, kicking, screaming, but it was relentless, pulling him under. He sank, the cold biting into him, and the basement vanished. He was in the attic again, or a version of it. The walls were flesh, pulsing and wet, the floor a carpet of shattered glass that cut into his hands as he crawled. The mirror stood in the center, larger now, its frame writhing with eyeless faces that moaned softly. His reflection stared back, but it wasn't trapped. It stood free, shard in hand, grinning as it carved the symbol into its own chest, black blood welling up. "You're late," it said, stepping toward him. Ethan scrambled back, but the flesh walls closed in, their heat suffocating. The reflection knelt, pressing the shard to his throat, and whispered, "The house needs a heart." The glass floor trembled, and Ethan felt it, a rhythm, a pulse, syncing with the hum, with the walls, with the thing wearing his face. He grabbed its wrist, twisting the shard away, and drove it into the reflection's eye. It shrieked, black ichor spraying, and dissolved into smoke, the shard clattering to the ground. The walls convulsed, the pulse faltering, and the mirror flickered, showing the real attic, empty, silent, the rain tapping against the window. Ethan lunged for it, hands slamming against the glass, and it bent again, stretching under his touch. The flesh walls screamed, a sound that tore through him, and the floor split, tendrils of shadow bursting upward, wrapping around his legs. He pushed harder, the glass thinning, and saw the attic beyond, real solid, so close. The tendrils tightened, dragging him back, but he clawed at the mirror, nails splintering, until it snapped, light flooding in as he fell through. He hit the attic floor, the real one, the air sharp and cold. The mirror stood behind him, intact, reflecting nothing but the empty room. He stumbled to his feet, chest heaving, and ran for the door, down the stairs, out into the yard. The rain soaked him, washing away the blood, the ichor, and he collapsed, mud clinging to his knees, the hum faint but still there, a whisper on the wind. He didn't see the imposter, didn't hear its footsteps, but he felt it, watching, waiting. The house loomed behind him, its windows dark, its walls still pulsing faintly, a heartbeat he couldn't unhear. He'd escaped again, but it wasn't over. The shard was still out there, the symbols still burned into his mind, and the house, alive, hungry, knew his name. The fog rolled in, thick and sudden, and a voice, not his mother's, but the old man's, whispered through it. "It's waking up." Ethan turned, but the fog swallowed the house, the road, everything, leaving him alone in a sea of white, the hum growing louder, closer, alive. The fog wasn't just thick, it was alive. It pressed against Ethan's skin, cold and clammy, seeping into his pores like a living thing. He couldn't see the house anymore, couldn't see the road or the trees, just an endless expanse of white that swallowed sound, light, everything. The hum pulsed within it, no longer a distant drone but a heartbeat, steady and insistent, matching the rhythm of his own. His breath came in shallow gasps, fog curling into his lungs, tasting of rust and decay. He stumbled forward, hands outstretched, searching for something solid, but the ground shifted beneath him, soft and sinking, like stepping on flesh. "It's waking up." The old man's voice echoed again, faint and fractured, carried on the wind that wasn't there. Ethan spun around, eyes darting through the haze, but he was alone, or so he thought. Shapes flickered in the fog, vague and fleeting, tall, emaciated figures with lolling heads, their jagged grins cutting through the white. They didn't move closer, didn't speak, just watched, their presence a weight that pressed against his skull. "Who's waking up?" he shouted, voice hoarse, swallowed by the fog. No answer came, only the hum, growing louder, threading through his thoughts like a needle. His legs trembled, exhaustion pulling at him, but he couldn't stop. He had to move, had to escape the house, the mirror, the thing wearing his face. He took a step, then another, the ground squelching under his boots, and the fog parted just enough to reveal a shadow ahead, the gas station, its neon sign flickering weakly, a beacon in the void. Relief surged, fragile and desperate, and he ran toward it, the hum chasing him, the shapes in the fog trailing like ghosts. The door chime rang as he burst inside, the same clerk glancing up from his magazine, his bored expression unchanged. "Back again," he said, voice flat, as if Ethan hadn't been gone, hadn't been dragged into hell and back. Ethan staggered to the counter, hands gripping the edge, mud and blood streaking the wood. "Call the police again," he rasped, chest heaving. "It's out there. It's coming." The clerk raised an eyebrow, skepticism hardening his gaze, but he reached for the phone, dialing with slow, deliberate movements. Ethan sank to the floor, the hum buzzing in his ears, and stared at the window. The fog pressed against the glass, thick and swirling, and he swore he saw eyes, black hollow, watching him from within it. The clerk muttered into the phone, his words a dull murmur, and Ethan's gaze drifted to the counter. A shard of glass lay there, small and jagged, its edges stained with dark crust. The same shard the imposter had wielded, the one he'd lost in the basement. His stomach dropped. He lunged for it, snatching it up, and the clerk flinched, dropping the receiver. "Hey, what the hell? Where did this come from?" Ethan demanded, holding the shard up, blood dripping from his clenched fist. The clerk stared, eyes wide, and stammered, "I don't know, man. It was just there when you came in." The hum surged, the lights flickering, and Ethan turned to the window. The fog thickened, tendrils seeping under the door, curling across the floor like smoke. The clerk backed away, his magazine falling, and Ethan felt it, a shift, a crack in the air. The fog wasn't just watching, it was moving, pouring into the station, a living tide that swallowed the shelves, the counter, the lights. The hum became a roar, and the clerk screamed, a sound cut off as the fog engulfed him, his silhouette dissolving into nothing. Ethan ran for the back door, the shard clutched tight. the fog snapping at his heels like jaws. He burst into an alley, the fog spilling after him, and kept running, the hum a deafening pulse that shook the ground. The alley twisted, narrowing, the walls closing in, stone now, slick with black ichor, the same as the basement. He was back in a house, or a piece of it, the fog dragging him deeper into its heart. The shard glowed faintly in his hand, red light pulsing from the symbol etched into it, and he felt it, calling to something, waking it. A figure emerged from the fog ahead, the imposter, its grin splitting its face, its black eyes glinting. It didn't move, didn't chase, just stood there, shard in hand, mirroring him. "You brought it," it said, its voice a chorus of his own, layered with the others, his mother, the old man, the countless trapped souls. "You woke it." The fog surged, and Ethan swung the shard, slashing at it, but it dissolved into smoke, reforming behind him. The ground split, a fissure racing toward him, and he jumped, landing hard as the fog thickened into a wall, trapping him. The imposter stepped closer, its breath rancid, and pressed its shard to his chest, right over his heart. "Listen," it whispered, and the hum clarified, splitting into voices, screams, pleas, laughter, all rising from the fissure, from the house, from the thing waking beneath it. Ethan shoved it back, the shard cutting into his palm, and ran, the fog parting just enough to reveal the house, looming alive, its windows glowing red, its walls pulsing like flesh. The imposter's laughter followed, and the fog tightened, dragging him toward it. He fought, clawing at the ground, but the shard pulsed hotter, sinking with the house's heartbeat, and he felt it, a presence vast and ancient, stirring beneath the earth. The old man's voice broke through, faint and urgent. "Break it." Ethan looked at the shard, its glow blinding now, and raised it, slamming it against the ground. It didn't shatter. It sang a high, piercing note that cut through the hum, the fog recoiling as if burned. The imposter shrieked, its form flickering, and the house trembled, cracks splitting its walls. Ethan stood, the shard still whole, its song growing louder, and ran toward the house, the fog snapping at him, the imposter's screams echoing in his skull. He didn't know what he was doing, didn't know what it meant, but he felt the shift. The house was afraid. He burst through the door, the walls bleeding ichor, the air thick with the stench of rot, and saw it, the mirror standing in the center of the living room, its surface black and rippling. The imposter appeared beside it, its grin faltering, and lunged. Ethan dodged, driving the shard into its chest, and it screamed, dissolving into ash. The mirror flared, light pouring from it, and the house roared, the floor buckling as something massive shifted below. Ethan raised the shard again, aiming for the glass, and the old man's voice whispered one last time, "Now." He struck, the shard sinking into the mirror, and the world exploded in light, sound, and shadow, the house collapsing around him as the thing beneath woke fully, its hunger a force that swallowed everything. The mirror didn't shatter, it screamed. The shard sank into its surface, and a sound erupted, a keening wail that tore through the house, the air, Ethan's mind. Light burst from the glass, blinding and jagged, and the walls of the living room buckled, flesh-like stone splitting open, black core pouring from the cracks like blood from a wound. The floor heaved, throwing Ethan back, and the hum surged into a roar, a primal, guttural howl that shook the earth beneath him. The house wasn't collapsing. It was unraveling, its bones snapping, its breath a hurricane that sucked the air from his lungs. He hit the ground hard, the shard still clutched in his hand, its song a high, relentless note that clashed with the roar. The mirror pulsed, light and shadow warring within it, and the imposter's ash swirled upward, reforming into a dozen grinning figures, their black eyes fixed on him. They didn't attack, didn't move, just stood there, a grotesque choir, their mouths opening in unison as the roar deepened, splitting into voices. "You woke it." Ethan scrambled to his feet, the floor tilting, cracking, revealing a void below. Not dirt, not stone, but a writhing mass of flesh and shadow, mouths gaping, eyes blinking in and out of existence. It was the thing he'd glimpsed in the void, the mass of trapped souls, but larger, alive, awake. The house shuddered, its walls peeling back like skin, and the fog poured in, thick and suffocating, tendrils wrapping around his legs, pulling him toward the pit. "No," he shouted, slashing at the fog with the shard, its light cutting through the white, forcing it back. The imposters laughed, their voices a cacophony, and the mirror flared again, showing not the room but a kaleidoscope of faces: his mother, the old man, strangers with hollow eyes all screaming, all dissolving into the mass below. The shard burned in his hand, its song growing louder, and he felt it, a connection, a pull, as if it were part of the house, part of the thing waking beneath. The floor split wider, and Ethan stumbled, catching himself on the edge of the pit. The mass surged upward, a tide of flesh and teeth, its mouth snapping inches from his face. He swung the shard, driving it into the nearest maw, and it shrieked, recoiling, black blood spraying across his arms. The house groaned, the walls trembling, and the impostors flickered, their grins faltering as the shard's light pulsed brighter. "Break it!" The old man's voice rang out, clear and sharp, cutting through the chaos. Ethan turned to the mirror, its surface rippling, the mass reflected within it, reaching for him through the glass. He raised the shard, its song a deafening crescendo, and drove it into the center of the mirror with all his strength. The glass cracked, fissures racing outward, and the light exploded, a supernova that swallowed the room, the pit, the impostors, everything. Ethan fell, the world dissolving around him, and landed in silence. The roar was gone, the hum silenced, the air still and cold. He opened his eyes, expecting the void, the fog, the house. But he was outside, sprawled in the muddy yard, the rain pounding down. The house stood before him, intact, its windows dark, its walls stone again, not flesh. The mirror was gone, the shard gone, the fog dissipated into the storm. He staggered to his feet, chest heaving, and stared at the house. It was quiet, too quiet, a stillness that felt like a held breath. The hum was faint now, a whisper on the edge of hearing, but it was there, buried deep. He turned, limping toward the road, the rain washing the blood and ichor from his skin. He didn't look back, didn't dare, but he felt it, the house watching, waiting, its hunger sated but not gone. The gas station emerged from the gloom, its neon sign steady now, and Ethan pushed inside, the chime ringing softly. The clerk was there, alive, flipping through his magazine as if nothing had happened. "You again," he said, glancing up. "Look like hell, man." Ethan didn't answer, sinking to the floor, the silence ringing in his ears. He checked his hands. No burns, no cuts, just mud and rain. The shard was gone, but its weight lingered, a ghost in his palm. He called his mother again, the phone trembling in his grip. It rang, and this time she answered, her voice warm, alive. "Ethan, where have you been?" "I've been worried, sick." Tears stung his eyes, relief crashing over him, but the hum buzzed faintly, a reminder that it wasn't over. "I'm okay," he lied, voice shaking. "I'll be home soon." The clerk slid him a coffee, and Ethan drank, the heat grounding him. Outside, the rain slowed, the storm fading, but the hum persisted, soft and insidious. He glanced at the window, and for a moment he saw it. A reflection in the glass, not his, but the impostor's, grinning, its black eyes glinting. It vanished when he blinked, but the message was clear. It wasn't gone. It was waiting. Days later, Ethan left the house behind, driving 3 states away to his mother's, the road stretching endlessly before him. She hugged him tight, her eyes searching his, but he didn't tell her, couldn't. The hum followed, faint but constant, a shadow in his mind. He checked mirrors obsessively, expecting that grin, those eyes, but they stayed empty, reflecting only him, until one night weeks later when he woke to silence. No hum, no whispers, just the quiet of his mother's house. He stumbled to the bathroom, splashing water on his face, and froze. The mirror above the sink showed him, tired, hollow, and real, but behind him, the old man stood, his face split into that jagged grin. "You didn't break it," he rasped, his voice a chorus. "You fed it." Ethan spun around, but the room was empty. The mirror flickered, and the hum returned, louder, hungrier, vibrating through the walls. Downstairs, his mother screamed, a sound cut off abruptly, and the house trembled, the floor cracking as something shifted beneath. He ran, heart pounding, but the mirrors followed, every glass surface reflecting not him, but them, the impostors, the mask, the hunger, all grinning, all waiting. The house wasn't gone. It had spread. The scream lingered in Ethan's ears, sharp and raw, as he bolted down the stairs of his mother's house. The hum was no longer a whisper. It was a growl, rumbling through the floorboards, rattling the windows, a predator awake and stretching its jaws. The air thickened, the familiar scent of his childhood home, lavender and old wood, replaced by the coppery tang of blood and the rot of something ancient. He reached the living room, heart hammering, and stopped dead. His mother wasn't there. The couch where she'd been sleeping was empty, the blanket tangled on the floor, streaked with dark smears that glistened in the dim light of a flickering lamp. The walls pulsed faintly, not stone or plaster anymore, but something softer, something alive, their surface rippling like skin under a heartbeat. Ethan's breath caught, his eyes darting to the source of the hum, the mirror above the fireplace, small and unassuming, now rippling like the one in the attic had, its frame curling inward as if melting. "Mom," he shouted, voice cracking, but the house swallowed the sound, bending it into an echo that mocked him. "Mom, Mom, Mom." The hum surged, and the mirror flared, light spilling from it, revealing not the room but the attic of the old house, the Victorian nightmare he'd fled. The imposter stood there, shard in hand, grinning, its black eyes glinting as it carved that symbol into the glass. The image shifted, and Ethan saw himself, trapped again, pounding on the other side, his face twisted in terror. "No," he whispered, backing away, but the floor softened, sucking at his feet, and the walls groaned, cracks splitting open to weep black ichor. The mirror pulsed, and his mother appeared within it, eyeless gray, her grin wide and jagged, her voice a wet rasp. "Ethan, it's beautiful." She reached out, her hand pressing against the glass, and the surface stretched, her fingers breaking through, clawing at the air inches from his face. He stumbled back, tripping over the coffee table, and the room tilted, the ceiling sagging as if it might collapse. The hum became a chorus, voices, hundreds of them, overlapping in a cacophony of screams and laughter. The old man's voice cut through, faint but urgent. "It's not the house. It's them." Ethan spun around, searching for him, but the shadows surged, tendrils bursting from the cracks, wrapping around his arms, his legs, dragging him toward the mirror. He fought, kicking, clawing, but the tendrils were relentless, their touch icy and sharp, cutting into his skin. The mirror loomed closer, his mother's hand still reaching, her grin splitting wider until her face was a mass of teeth and shadow. "Join us," she hissed, and the glass pulsed, a void opening within it, the mass of flesh and mouths he'd seen beneath the old house now awake, its hunger a force that pulled at his soul. Ethan twisted, his hand brushing something hard, the fireplace poker, cold and heavy. He grabbed it, swinging wildly, and struck the mirror. The glass cracked, a single fissure racing upward, and his mother's image flickered, her scream a high-pitched wail as the tendrils recoiled. The room shuddered, the walls bleeding faster, and Ethan swung again, harder, the crack widening. Light poured from the fracture, blinding him, and the hum faltered, the voices fracturing into static. He didn't stop. He hit the mirror again and again, each blow a desperate cry, until it shattered, shards exploding outward, slicing his arms, his face. The void within collapsed, the mass shrieking as it was sucked back into darkness, and the tendrils released him, dissolving into smoke. Ethan fell to his knees, gasping, the poker clattering to the floor. The room was silent, the walls still, the hum gone for now. But his mother was still gone. He searched the house, room by room, calling her name, his voice hoarse and trembling. The kitchen was empty, the bedroom untouched, the basement locked tight. He pounded on the door, dread pooling in his gut, but it wouldn't budge. The mirrors were everywhere now. Every reflective surface, from the bathroom sink to the glass of a picture frame, showed not him but them, the imposters, the grinning faces, watching, waiting. He ran outside, the night air sharp and cold, the suburban street quiet under a crescent moon. His mother's car sat in the driveway, untouched, but the neighbors' houses were dark, their windows reflecting nothing but the sky. Ethan staggered to the sidewalk, chest heaving, and glanced back. The front door hung open, and in the doorway stood the imposter, his face, his body, its grin splitting wider, its black eyes glinting with triumph. "You can't stop it," it said, its voice a chorus, and the street trembled, cracks splitting the pavement, black ichor seeping up. The hum returned, louder, hungrier, and the imposter stepped forward, its shadow stretching impossibly long, merging with the darkness spilling from the house. Ethan ran, legs burning, the hum chasing him, the cracks racing alongside, swallowing the road, the lawns, the world. He didn't know where he was going, away, anywhere, but the hum was everywhere, the air thickening with fog that curled around him, alive and snapping. Shapes moved within it. His mother, the old man, the imposters, all grinning, all reaching. The streetlights flickered, dying one by one, and the fog swallowed the houses, leaving him in a void of white and shadow. He tripped, falling hard, and the fog parted, revealing a mirror full-length ornate, standing alone in the emptiness. His reflection stared back, but it wasn't him. It was the imposter, shard in hand, carving the symbol into its chest, black blood dripping. "It's us now," it said, and the fog surged, dragging him toward it. Ethan clawed at the ground, nails splintering, but the mirror loomed closer, its glass pulsing, the mass within waking again, its mouth gaping. The old man's voice whispered, faint and fading, "It's not one, it's all." Ethan's hand brushed something sharp, the poker impossibly there, and he grabbed it, swinging with everything he had. The mirror cracked, light flaring, and the fog screamed, the imposter dissolving into ash. The mass roared, tendrils bursting from the glass, but Ethan struck again, shattering it completely, the void collapsing in a burst of light and sound. He woke in his mother's living room, sprawled on the floor, the poker beside him. The mirror above the fireplace was gone, the wall bare, the house silent. His mother sat on the couch, alive, unharmed, staring at him with wide, worried eyes. "Ethan, what happened?" she asked, voice trembling. He didn't answer, couldn't, his gaze fixed on the window. The reflection there showed not him, but the old man, grinning, his face splitting as the hum buzzed faintly, a promise of what was still to come. The house was quiet, but the world wasn't. The hunger had spread. Ethan didn't move from the floor, his mother's voice a distant hum beneath the hum, the real hum, that buzzed in his skull, soft but relentless. Her hands gripped his shoulders, shaking him gently, her words a plea, "Ethan, talk to me. What's wrong?" He couldn't look at her, couldn't face the fear in her eyes, not when the reflection in the window loomed behind her. The old man, his grin splitting wider, his hollow eyes fixed on Ethan like a predator sizing up its prey. The glass flickered, and he was gone, but the hum remained, a thread tying Ethan to something he couldn't escape. "I'm fine," he lied, voice raw, forcing himself to sit up. His mother's face crumpled, relief warring with doubt, but she nodded, brushing a hand through his hair like she had when he was a child. "You scared me," she said, her voice trembling. "I woke up, and you were screaming, thrashing on the floor. I thought..." She stopped, swallowing hard, and Ethan forced a smile, brittle and false. "Just a nightmare," he said, but the poker beside him gleamed in the lamplight, a silent contradiction. The house was still, the walls solid again, the air clean of rot and blood. But Ethan felt it, the shift, the weight, the way the silence pressed against him like a held breath. He stood, legs unsteady, and glanced at the window again. His own reflection stared back now, tired and hollow-eyed, but he didn't trust it. He never would. "I need air," he muttered, brushing past his mother's protest, and stepped outside. The suburban streets stretched before him, bathed in the pale glow of dawn, the sky streaked with pink and gray. The cracks in the pavement were gone, the fog dissipated, the houses quiet and ordinary. Birds chirped, a dog barked in the distance, and for a moment, Ethan could almost believe it was over, almost. The hum buzzed faintly, a whisper on the wind, and he scanned the windows of the neighboring houses. Every reflection was his own, but they weren't right. Too still, too wide-eyed, their edges blurring into something not quite human. He walked, hands shoved in his pockets, the morning air sharp against his skin. His mother's house faded behind him, the street curving toward town, and the hum grew louder, syncing with his steps. A car passed, its driver waving, a neighbor he vaguely recognized, but the man's reflection in the side mirror grinned, black eyes glinting, gone when Ethan blinked. He stopped, heart pounding, and looked around. The world was waking up. A woman jogging with her dog, a kid on a bike, a mailman sorting letters. Normal. Too normal. The hum pulsed, and Ethan's gaze snapped to a shop window across the street, a bakery, its glass displaying rows of pastries. His reflection stood there, but it wasn't alone. The imposter loomed behind it, shard in hand, its grin splitting its face ear to ear. The jogger passed the window, her reflection eyeless, grinning, her dog's head lolling unnaturally. The kid on the bike rode by, his reflection clawing at its own face, blood dripping. The mailman's shadow stretched too long, its edges fraying into tendrils that writhed in the glass. Ethan backed away, breath hitching, and the hum roared, the reflections flickering in unison. Hundreds of them, all him, all them, spreading through every mirror, every window, every shard of glass in the world. No, he whispered, turning to run, but the street twisted, the houses leaning inward, their windows glowing faintly red. The hum was everywhere, vibrating through the ground, the air, his bones, and the reflections stepped out, not into the street, but into each other, merging, growing, a mass of flesh and grins that pulsed with the same hunger he felt beneath the house. He ran, blind and frantic, the town unraveling around him. The bakery's window shattered, glass skittering across the pavement like insects, reforming into smaller mirrors that reflected the mass, its mouth gaping, its eyes blinking. The jogger stopped, her head snapping toward him, her grin splitting wide as she dropped to all fours, her dog dissolving into shadow. The kid's bike clattered to the ground, his body stretching, limbs cracking as he joined the mass, his laughter a high, keening wail. The mailman's bag spilled letters that fluttered upward, each one reflecting Ethan's face, screaming. The hum became a voice, not his mother's, not the old man's, but theirs, a chorus of the trapped, the devoured, the awake. You fed us. Ethan stumbled, falling to his knees, and the mass surged closer, a tide of flesh and shadow that swallowed the street, the houses, the sky. He clawed at the pavement, nails splintering, and saw it, a storm drain, its grate glinting with water, reflecting not the mass but the old man, his face whole, his eyes pleading. Break it, the old man rasped, his voice cutting through the roar. Break you? Ethan froze, the words a blade in his mind. The mass loomed, its mouth snapping, and he understood, not the mirrors, not the shard, but him. He was the seal, the heart, the thing they'd fed. The hum synced with his pulse, and he felt it, the hunger, the connection, the piece of him that wasn't him anymore. He stood, the mass inches away, and raised his hands to his face, fingers trembling. The reflections watched, their grins faltering, and he dug in, nails tearing into his skin, blood welling up. Pain seared through him, but he didn't stop, peeling back the flesh, the hum screaming as he clawed deeper. The mass shrieked, tendrils lashing, but they couldn't touch him, not yet. He felt it, a crack, a fracture in his mind, his soul, and he pushed, breaking himself open. Light burst from him, not from the mirrors but from within, a blinding flare that swallowed the mass, the town, the world. The hum fractured, the voices dissolving into static, and Ethan fell, the ground rushing up to meet him. He landed in silence, sprawled on the pavement, the storm drained beside him reflecting only the sky. The town was still again, the jogger jogging, the kid biking, the mailman sorting. Ethan sat up, blood dripping from his hands, his face intact but scarred, the hum gone. He stood, unsteady, and walked back to his mother's house, the mirrors empty, the reflections his own. She hugged him, tears in her eyes, and he led her, the silence of fragile peace. But that night, as he slept, the hum returned, a whisper faint and distant, buried deep. He woke, heart pounding, and looked at the window. His reflection stared back, normal, tired, real. Until it blinked when he didn't, its grin splitting wide, and the hum pulsed once, a promise. It wasn't over. It was waiting. Ethan didn't scream when he saw the reflection blink. He didn't move, didn't breathe, just stared, his heart a hammer against his ribs, as the grin stretched wider, splitting the familiar contours of his face into something alien, something wrong. The hum pulsed once, a single, deliberate note, then fell silent, leaving the room heavy with its absence. The reflection didn't move again, didn't step out or speak. It just watched, its black eyes glinting like polished stone, a predator biding its time. He slid out of bed, bare feet silent on the hardwood, and backed away, keeping the window in his peripheral vision. The reflection stayed, locked in place, but he felt it, its gaze a weight that followed him across the room. His mother's house was quiet, the kind of quiet that smothered sound, amplifying the creak of the floor, the faint drip of a faucet downstairs. He grabbed a sweatshirt, pulling it on with trembling hands, and slipped into the hall, the hum buzzing faintly at the edge of hearing, a ghost of what it had been. The bathroom mirror was empty when he passed, reflecting only the dim glow of the nightlight, but he didn't trust it. He didn't trust anything anymore. Not the glass, not the silence, not himself. Downstairs, his mother slept on the couch, her breathing soft and even, the blanket pulled tight around her. Ethan paused, watching her, the scars on his hands itching as if they remembered the blood, the breaking. She was real, alive, untouched, at least for now. But the hum whispered otherwise, a promise that nothing was safe. He stepped outside, the night air biting into his skin, the suburban streets stretching dark and still under a sky thick with clouds. The stars were gone, swallowed by a blackness that felt too deep, too alive. He walked, hands shoved in his pockets, the hum trailing him like a shadow, soft but insistent. The reflections followed too, in car windows and puddles left by the rain, each one his own at first, then shifting, blinking when he didn't, grinning when he frowned. He kept moving, eyes forward, refusing to engage, but the hum grew, threading through his thoughts, tugging at the fracture he'd made in himself. The town slept, its streets empty, its houses dark, but the mirrors were awake. Every window he passed flickered, a parade of imposters staring back, his face, his mother's, the old man's, all grinning, all waiting. He turned a corner, the hum pulsing louder, and stopped. A park stretched before him, its playground shrouded in mist, the swings swaying gently, though there was no wind. At its center stood a fountain, its water still, its surface a perfect mirror reflecting not the sky but the attic. The old house, the mirror, the shard glinting in the imposter's hand. Ethan's breath caught, the hum surging into a growl, and the reflection moved. The imposter stepped out of the fountain, water rippling around its boots, its grin splitting wider as it raised the shard. "You thought you broke it," it said, its voice his own, layered with the chorus of the trapped. "You only opened the door." The mist thickened, curling around him, and the playground shifted, the swings creaking faster, the slide bending, the ground softening into flesh. He ran, the imposter's laughter chasing him, the hum roaring in his skull. The town warped around him, houses leaning inward, their windows glowing red, their reflections merging into the mass, flesh and mouths, eyes and teeth, all reaching. He didn't know where he was running to, only that he couldn't stop, couldn't let it catch him. The mist parted, and he stumbled into a parking lot, asphalt cracked and bleeding ichor, a single street lamp flickering above a payphone, old, rusted, impossibly there. The hum pulsed, and Ethan grabbed the receiver, slamming coins he didn't remember having into the slot. He dialed his mother's number, praying she'd answer, praying she was still there. It rang once, twice, then clicked, a voice not hers, but the old man's, cracked and trembling. "It's in you." The line went dead, the hum surging, and the street lamp died, plunging the lot into darkness. The imposter emerged from the mist, shard glowing red, its grin a wound across its face. "You can't run from yourself," it said, stepping closer, and Ethan felt it, the fracture, the piece of him he'd broken, pulsing in time with the shard, with the hum, with the mass. The parking lot trembled, cracks splitting wider, and the mist thickened into fog, alive and snapping, dragging him toward the imposter. He swung, fist connecting with its jaw, but it dissolved into smoke, reforming behind him. "Break it," the old man's voice whispered, faint and urgent, and Ethan understood, not the shard, not the mirrors, but the connection, the thread tying him to them. He dropped to his knees, hands clawing at his chest, digging into the scars, tearing at the fracture he'd made. Pain seared through him, light flaring within, and the imposter shrieked, the fog recoiling, the hum fracturing. The mass burst from the cracks, a tide of flesh and shadow, but Ethan pushed deeper, breaking himself open, light pouring out, a scream, a supernova, swallowing the lot, the imposter, the mass. He fell, the world dissolving, and woke in his mother's living room, sprawled on the floor, the sun streaming through the window. She knelt beside him, shaking him, her voice panicked, "Ethan, wake up." He sat up, gasping, the hum gone, the reflections empty. His hands were scarred but whole, the fracture sealed, the light faded. "I'm okay," he said, voice hoarse, and she hugged him, tears in her eyes. The house was quiet, the world still, and for a moment he believed he'd won. But that night, as he stood at the sink, washing dishes, the hum returned, a whisper faint and buried, pulsing in the drain. He looked up, and the window reflected not him, but the mass grinning, waiting, its mouths whispering his name. The fracture ached, a crack that wouldn't heal, and he knew it wasn't over. It was patient. Ethan dropped the plate, the crash shattering the silence of his mother's kitchen. It hit the floor in pieces, jagged edges glinting in the overhead light, and for a moment he saw it, the mass, its mouth gaping, reflected in every shard. The hum pulsed louder, a steady thrum that vibrated through the sink, the counter, his hands, sinking with the ache in his chest where the fracture lingered. His mother's voice called from the living room, soft and concerned. "Ethan, you okay?" But he couldn't answer, couldn't move, his eyes locked on the window above the sink. The mass stared back, its flesh a writhing tapestry of limbs and eyes, its grin splitting wider, whispering his name in a chorus that slithered into his skull. It didn't move, didn't break through, just watched, patient and eternal, a shadow behind the glass. Ethan's breath fogged the window, and when he blinked, it was gone, replaced by his own reflection, pale, hollow-eyed real. But the hum remained, a thread he couldn't cut, a wound he couldn't close. "Ethan." His mother appeared in the doorway, her face creased with worry, a mug of tea trembling in her hands. He forced a nod, bending to pick up the broken plate, the shards biting into his fingers. "Just clumsy," he muttered, voice tight, and she hovered uncertain before retreating with a quiet, "Be careful." He dumped the pieces in the trash, blood smearing the edges, and washed his hands, the water stinging the cuts, the hum buzzing faintly in the drain. He couldn't stay still. The house felt smaller now, the walls pressing in, the air thick with something he couldn't name, dread, maybe, or the residue of the thing he'd unleashed. He grabbed his jacket, muttering about needing a walk, and stepped outside before his mother could protest. The night was cold, the suburban street bathed in the orange glow of streetlights, the silence broken only by the rustle of leaves skittering across the pavement. The hum followed, soft but insistent, a companion he couldn't shake. He walked without direction, hands shoved deep in his pockets, the scars on his palms itching as if they remembered the shard, the breaking. The reflections trailed him in car windows, in the glass of a bus stop shelter, each one his own at first, then shifting, blinking when he didn't, their grins creeping in. He kept his head down, focusing on the rhythm of his steps, but the hum grew, threading through the night, pulling at the fracture in his chest. The sound broke his trance, a low, guttural chuckle, wet and familiar. He froze, scanning the street, and saw it, a figure at the far end, standing under a flickering streetlight, its silhouette too tall, too thin, its head lolling unnaturally. The imposter. It didn't move, didn't approach, just watched, the shard glinting in its hand, its grin splitting wide in the dim light. The hum surged, and the street trembled, cracks splitting the pavement, black ichor seeping up like oil. Ethan turned, walking faster, the chuckle following, the hum roaring in his ears. The street warped, houses leaning inward, their windows glowing red, their reflections merging into the mass, flesh and mouths, eyes and teeth, all reaching. He broke into a run, the imposter's laughter echoing, the cracks racing alongside him, swallowing the road. The hum pulsed with his heartbeat, the fracture aching, and he felt it. Connection, the piece of him tied to them, bleeding light he couldn't see. He stumbled into an alley, narrow and dark, the walls slick with something that wasn't water. The hum clarified, splitting into voices, his mother, the old man, the chorus of the trapped, all whispering, "You're us." The imposter appeared at the alley's end, its grin a wound, its shard glowing red, and the walls pulsed, flesh now, not stone, closing in. Ethan backed away, hands clawing at his chest, the fracture burning, and the old man's voice cut through, faint and desperate. "Close it." He didn't know how, didn't know what it meant, but the imposter stepped closer, its breath rancid, its shard raised. "You can't." It hissed and swung. Ethan dodged, the shard slicing the air inches from his throat, and lunged, tackling it to the ground. It dissolved into smoke, reforming behind him, but he didn't stop. He clawed at his chest, tearing at the scars, the fracture splitting open under his nails. Light flared, a searing burst from within, and the imposter shrieked, the alley trembling, the flesh walls recoiling. Ethan pushed deeper, pain blinding him, blood welling up, and the hum fractured, the voices dissolving into static. The imposter swung again, the shard sinking into his shoulder, but he didn't falter. He tore at the fracture, breaking himself wider, light pouring out, swallowing the alley, the imposter, the mass lurking in the shadows. He fell, the world dissolving, and woke on his mother's porch, sprawled in the dawn light, blood soaking his shirt, the shard gone. His chest ached, The fracture sealed but raw, the hum silent. He staggered inside, his mother rushing to him, her screams a distant echo as he collapsed, the room spinning. She called an ambulance, her hands pressing a towel to his shoulder, but he barely felt it. The silence was louder, a void where the hum had been. Days passed in a blur, hospital beds, stitches, questions he couldn't answer. The doctors said he'd been stabbed, but the wound was shallow, the blood loss minimal. His mother hovered, her eyes red from crying, and he let her fuss, let the world pretend it was normal. The mirrors stayed empty, the reflections his own, and the hum didn't return. He began to hope, fragile, tentative, that it was over. Until the night he left the hospital, driving home with his mother, the radio crackling with static. The hum buzzed faintly, a whisper in the noise, and he glanced at the rearview mirror. His reflection stared back, normal at first, then blinked when he didn't, its grin splitting wide. The car swerved, his mother gasping, and he corrected it, heart pounding, but the hum pulsed once, then fell silent. He didn't tell her, didn't stop driving, but the fracture ached, a crack that wouldn't heal. The world was quiet, but the mirrors weren't. They watched, they waited, and Ethan knew it wasn't gone. It was patient, biding its time, bleeding through the fracture he couldn't close. The drive home was a blur, the hum's faint pulse fading into the hum of the car's engine, leaving Ethan gripping the steering wheel too tight, his knuckles white against the scars. His mother sat beside him, her hands twisting the edge of her scarf, her silence louder than any question she could have asked. The rearview mirror stayed empty after that single, grinning blink. No imposter, no mask, just the dark stretch of road behind them. But Ethan didn't trust it. He didn't trust anything anymore. Not the quiet, not the night, not the fracture in his chest that throbbed with every heartbeat. They pulled into the driveway, the house looming in the headlights, its windows dark and still. His mother climbed out, her steps slow, weary, and Ethan followed, the air cold against his skin, the silence pressing in. The hum was gone, buried deep, but its absence felt like a trap, a pause before the next strike. He locked the car, the click echoing in the stillness, and glanced at the side mirror. His reflection stared back, normal, tired, real. He held its gaze, waiting for the blink, the grin, but it didn't move. Not yet. Inside, his mother busied herself with tea, the clink of the kettle a fragile anchor in the quiet. Ethan sank onto the couch, the stitches in his shoulder pulling tight, the pain a dull reminder of the shard, the alley, the light he'd torn from himself. He rubbed his chest, the fracture a raw ache beneath his shirt, and listened to the house, to the world, to the silence that wasn't silent. It buzzed, not with sound but with feeling, a pressure against his skull, a whisper he couldn't hear but knew was there. "You should rest," his mother said, setting a mug in front of him, her voice soft but strained. She didn't meet his eyes, didn't ask about the blood, the hospital, the lies he'd told the doctors. She knew something was wrong, had known since he'd stumbled back from that house. But she didn't push, and he was grateful. He nodded, sipping the tea, the heat grounding him, and watched her shuffle upstairs, her shadow stretching long against the wall. Alone, the house settled around him, creaking softly, breathing. He didn't sleep, couldn't, not with the fracture pulsing, the silence screaming. He stood, pacing the living room, the windows reflecting only darkness, the mirrors empty. The clock ticked past midnight, then 1, then 2, and the hum returned, a whisper faint and buried, threading through the walls. Ethan froze, his breath fogging in the suddenly cold air, and turned to the fireplace. The mirror was gone, shattered days ago, but the blank wall above it shimmered, rippling like glass. The hum pulsed, and the ripple widened, a full-length mirror forming where none had been, ornate, its frame crawling with eyeless faces, its surface black and still. Ethan's reflection stared back, normal at first, then blinked, its grin splitting wide, black eyes glinting. "You didn't close it," it rasped, its voice his own, layered with the chorus of the trapped. The fracture burned, light flickering beneath his skin, and the reflection stepped forward, pressing its hands to the glass. Ethan backed away, the hum roaring now, the walls trembling, cracks splitting the plaster, black ichor seeping out. The reflection didn't break through, just watched, its grin a wound, and the room shifted, the floors softening into flesh, the ceiling sagging like a bloated corpse. "You're the door," it said, and the mirror pulsed, the mass appearing behind it, flesh and mouth, eyes and teeth, all reaching, all whispering his name. He ran, stumbling upstairs, the hum chasing him, the walls bleeding faster. His mother's room was empty, the bed unmade, the window open, fog pouring in, thick, alive, curling around him like fingers. "Mom," he shouted, voice cracking, but the fog swallowed it, the hum surging into a growl. The mirror followed, appearing at the end of the hall, the reflection stepping out, shard in hand, its grin splitting wider. "You can't run," it said, gliding closer, the fog snapping at his heels. Ethan bolted into the bathroom, slamming the door, the small mirror above the sink reflecting not him but the old man, his face whole, his eyes pleading. "Close it," he rasped, and the reflection lunged, the door buckling under its weight. Ethan clawed at his chest, the fracture searing, light flaring within, but the hum roared louder, drowning it out. The door splintered, the imposter bursting through, shard raised, and Ethan swung, fist connecting with its jaw. It dissolved into smoke, reforming behind him, and drove the shard into his back. Pain exploded, light pouring from the wound, and the imposter shrieked, the fog recoiling. Ethan tore at the fracture, breaking himself open wider, blood and light spilling out, the hum fracturing into static. The mass surged from the mirror, tendrils lashing, but Ethan pushed deeper, the light swallowing the room, the imposter, the fog. He fell, the world dissolving, and woke in the living room, sprawled on the floor, the sun streaming through the window. His mother knelt beside him, shaking him, her voice panicked, "Ethan, wake up." The mirror above the fireplace was gone, the walls solid, the hum silent. He sat up, gasping, blood soaking his shirt, the shard gone. His chest ached, the fracture sealed but bleeding beneath the skin, light flickering faintly. "I'm okay," he said, voice hoarse, and she hugged him, tears in her eyes. The house was quiet, the world still, but the silence screamed, the fracture pulsed, the hum waited, and Ethan knew it wasn't over. It was in him, bleeding through the crack he couldn't close. That night, as he stood at the window, watching the street, the reflection blinked when he didn't, its grin splitting wide. The hum pulsed once, then fell silent, and Ethan felt it, the mass, the hunger, the door he become. The world was quiet, but he wasn't. He was the whisper, the wait, the scream. Ethan didn't flinch when the reflection grinned this time. He stood at the window, hands pressed against the glass, the cold seeping into his palms as the hum pulsed once, then retreated into silence. His reflection stared back, its black eyes glinting, its jagged grin a mirror of the fracture that throbbed in his chest, raw, bleeding, alive. He felt it now, not just as pain but as a presence, a weight that wasn't his, a door he'd opened and couldn't shut. The world outside was still, the suburban street bathed in moonlight, but the silence was a lie. He was the scream beneath it, the whisper that waited. His mother slept upstairs, her breathing soft and even, oblivious to the shift, the hum, the thing he'd become. Ethan turned from the window, the reflection lingering in his peripheral vision, and paced the living room. The walls were solid again, the air clean, but he felt them, pulsing faintly, breathing with him, sinking with the fracture that bled light he couldn't see. The mirror above the fireplace was gone, its absence a blank scar on the wall, but it didn't matter. The mirrors were everywhere now. In him, through him, a network of cracks spreading beyond the house, beyond the town. He sank onto the couch, hands trembling, and rubbed his chest, the stitches in his shoulder pulling tight. The fracture ached, a deep, insistent throb, and he pressed harder, as if he could push it back, seal it shut. But it pushed back. Light flickered beneath his skin, faint and fleeting, and the hum buzzed, a whisper in his blood. "You're the door," the imposter had said, and Ethan understood now. Not a prisoner, not a victim, but a conduit, a bridge between the world and the mass, the hunger, the grins. The old man's voice echoed, faint and fractured. "Close it." Ethan clenched his fists, nails digging into his palms, blood welling up. He tried, torn himself open, bled light, shattered mirrors, but it wasn't enough. The fracture remained, bleeding, breathing, and the hum waited, patient and eternal. He stood, the room tilting slightly, and walked to the kitchen, the hum trailing him like a shadow. The sink glinted, its chrome faucet reflecting his face, normal at first, then blinking, grinning, black eyes staring. He smashed it with his fist, glass and metal shattering, water spraying, but the reflection laughed, its voice echoing in the drain. "You can't break me," it rasped, and the hum surged, the walls trembling, cracks splitting the tiles, black ichor seeping out. Ethan stumbled back, blood dripping from his hand, and the reflection flickered, replaced by the mass, flesh and mouths, eyes and teeth, all whispering his name. He ran, not out but in, deeper into the house, the hum roaring now, the walls pulsing faster. The stairs groaned under his weight, the banisters softening into flesh, and he burst into his mother's room. She was gone, bed empty, window open, fog pouring in, thick and alive, curling around him like tendrils. "Mom," he shouted, voice cracking, but the fog swallowed it, the hum surging into a growl. The mirror followed, appearing on the wall, the reflection stepping out, shard in hand, its grin splitting wide. "You're us," it said, gliding closer, the fog snapping at his heels. Ethan dodged, grabbing a lamp and swinging, but passed through the imposter, the bulb shattering against the wall. The reflection laughed, driving the shard into his thigh, and pain exploded, light pouring from the wound, the fog recoiling. Ethan tore at his chest, the fracture searing, blood and light spilling out, and the imposter shrieked, the room trembling, the mass surging from the mirror. He pushed deeper, breaking himself wider, light swallowing the fog, the imposter, the mass. The world dissolved, and he woke in the yard, sprawled in the mud, the rain pounding down. The house loomed behind him, intact, its windows dark, the hum silent. His chest bled, the fracture raw but sealed, light flickering faintly. He staggered to his feet, the rain washing the blood away, and limped inside, his mother rushing to him, her screams a distant echo as he collapsed. She called for help, her hands pressing a towel to his thigh, but he barely felt it. The silence was louder, a void where the hum had been. Days passed, hospital again, stitches again, questions again, but the mirrors stayed empty, the reflections his own. His mother hovered, her eyes red, and he let her fuss, let the world pretend it was normal. The hum didn't return, and he began to hope, fragile, desperate, that he closed it. Until the night he stood at the bathroom sink, washing his face, the water stinging the scars. The hum buzzed faintly, a whisper in the drain, and he looked up. The mirror reflected not him, but his mother, eyeless, grinning, her voice a wet rasp. "You're beautiful." She reached out, her hand breaking through the glass, and Ethan stumbled back, the hum roaring, the walls trembling, cracks splitting the tiles. He ran, the mirror following, appearing on every wall, his mother stepping out, shard in hand, her grin splitting wider. "Join us," she hissed, and the mass surged from the glass, tendrils lashing, mouth snapping. Ethan tore at his chest, the fracture bleeding light, but the hum drowned it out, the mass swallowing him. He fell, the world dissolving, and woke in his bed, gasping, the room quiet, the mirror gone. His mother slept downstairs, alive, unharmed, but the fracture pulsed, bleeding beneath his skin, the hum waiting. He stood at the window, the reflection blinking when he didn't, its grin splitting wide, and the hum pulsed once, then fell silent. He was the door, the breath, the scream, and the world was the house now, alive, hungry, bleeding through him. Ethan stood at the window, the reflection's grin etched into his mind even as it faded, the hum pulsing once before sinking back into silence. His chest throbbed, the fracture a living wound beneath his skin, bleeding light he couldn't see but felt, a heat, a pressure, a door that wouldn't close. The suburban street stretched beyond the glass, quiet under a sky heavy with clouds, but he knew it was a lie. The world wasn't still. It was holding its breath, waiting for him to exhale, to let it in. He didn't wake his mother this time. She slept downstairs, curled on the couch, her soft snores a fragile tether to the life he'd once known. He couldn't face her, couldn't risk seeing her reflection shift, her eyes hollow, her grin splitting wide. The hum buzzed faintly, a whisper in his blood, and he moved silently through the house, avoiding mirrors, avoiding glass, his hands trembling as he pulled on his jacket. He had to leave, not just the house, but the town, the world he'd broken. The front door creaked as he slipped outside, the night air sharp and cold, the streetlights flickering like dying stars. The hum followed, soft but insistent, threading through the shadows, syncing with the fracture's pulse. He walked, head down, the reflections trailing him, in car windows and puddles, in the glass of a mailbox. each one his own at first, then blinking, grinning, black eyes glinting. He didn't look, didn't stop, but the hum grew, a growl beneath the silence, and the street warped, the houses leaning inward, their windows glowing faintly red. A sound broke the quiet, a wet, guttural chuckle, too close, too real. Ethan spun around, the street empty save for a figure at the far end, standing under a flickering light. The imposter, its silhouette tall and thin, its head lolling, the shard glinting in its hand. Its grin split wide, and the hum surged, the pavement trembling, cracks splitting open, black eye cores seeping up. "You're running out of places," it rasped, its voice his own, layered with the chorus of the trapped, and the shadows stretched, tendrils curling toward him. He bolted, the imposter's laughter echoing, the cracks racing alongside, swallowing the road. The hum roared, the fracture burning, and he felt it, the mass, the hunger bleeding through him, reaching for the world. He turned a corner, the town unraveling, streetlights bending, houses pulsing, their windows reflecting not the night but the attic, the mirror, the shard. The imposter appeared ahead, gliding closer, and Ethan veered into an alley, the walls slick with ichor, the air thick with rot. The hum clarified, splitting into voices, his mother, the old man, the mass all whispering, "You're us." The imposter followed, its shard glowing red, and the walls closed in, flesh now, breathing with him. Ethan clawed at his chest, the fracture searing, light flickering beneath his skin, but the hum drowned it, the imposter lunging, shard raised. He dodged, the blade slicing the air, and tackled it, driving his fist into its face. It dissolved into smoke, reforming behind him, and swung again, the shard sinking into his arm. Pain exploded, light pouring from the wound, and the imposter shrieked, the alley trembling, the flesh walls recoiling. Ethan tore at his chest, breaking the fracture wider, blood and light spilling out, the hum fracturing into static. The mass surged from the shadows, tendrils lashing, mouth snapping, but he pushed deeper, light swallowing the alley, the imposter, the mass. The world dissolved, and he woke on a pavement, sprawled in the rain, the town quiet, the hum silent. He staggered to his feet, blood soaking his jacket, the fracture raw but sealed, light flickering faintly. The alley was gone, the street intact, the houses dark and still. He limped back to his mother's house, the rain washing the blood away, and slipped inside, collapsing on the couch. His mother slept, unharmed, and he watched her, the silence of fragile peace. Days passed, quiet days, normal days, but the fracture pulsed, bleeding beneath his skin, the hum waiting. He avoided mirrors, kept the lights low, told himself it was over. Until the night he stood at the kitchen sink, washing dishes, the water stinging his scars. The hum buzzed faintly, a whisper in the drain, and he looked up. The window reflected not him, but the world, streets, houses, people, all grinning, all eyeless, all reaching. He dropped the dish, the crash echoing, and his mother stirred, calling his name. The reflection shifted, showing her eyeless, grinning, shard in hand, and the hum roared, the walls trembling, cracks splitting the floor. Ethan ran to her, shaking her awake, her eyes wide and real, but the hum surged, the windows pulsing, the mass bleeding through. "We have to go," he said, pulling her up, and they stumbled outside, the street warping, the houses breathing, the reflections everywhere. The imposter stood in the yard, shard glowing, its grin splitting wide. "You're the breath," it hissed, and the mass surged from the cracks, swallowing the lawn, the house, the world. Ethan tore at his chest, light flaring, but the hum drowned it, the mass wrapping around him, around her. His mother screamed, her voice fracturing, and the old man's voice whispered, faint and final, "You can't close it." The light faded, the mass swallowed them, and Ethan woke alone, sprawled in a void of black glass, the hum silent, the fracture bleeding. The world was gone, the reflections gone, but he felt it, the hunger, the breath, the door he'd become. He stood, the glass stretching endlessly, and the hum pulsed once, a promise. It wasn't over. It was him. The black glass stretched beneath Ethan's feet, infinite and cold, a mirror reflecting nothing but the void above, a churning expanse of shadow, silent and still, yet alive with the weight of unseen eyes. The hum pulsed once, faint but deliberate, a heartbeat in the emptiness, and the fracture in his chest throbbed, bleeding light he couldn't see but felt, a searing heat, a crack that widened with every breath. He was alone, the world gone, His mother gone, swallowed by the mass, the hunger, the door he'd become. The silence screamed, and he was its voice. He stood, legs trembling, the glass smooth and unyielding under his scarred hands. The hum buzzed faintly, a whisper in his blood, and he pressed his palm to his chest, the fracture pulsing in time with it. "What am I?" he rasped, voice cracking, the sound swallowed by the void. No answer came, no imposter, no old man, no chorus of the trapped, just the hum, soft and patient, threading through the glass, through him. He walked, though direction meant nothing here, each step echoing faintly, the glass rippling under his weight like water frozen mid-wave. The fracture ached, light flickering beneath his skin, and the hum grew, a growl beneath the silence. Shadows shifted above, tendrils dripping down like ink, pooling around him, and the glass pulsed, reflecting not him but the mass, flesh and mouths, eyes and teeth, all grinning, all whispering his name. "You're us," the chorus rasped, 1,000 voices layered into one, and the glass cracked, fissures racing outward, black ichor seeping up. Ethan stumbled, falling to his knees, the tendrils curling closer, their touch icy and sharp. He clawed at his chest, the fracture searing, light spilling out, and the mass recoiled, its screams fracturing the hum. "No," he shouted, tearing deeper, blood and light pouring from him, the glass trembling, the void roaring. The light flared, swallowing the tendrils, the mass, the shadows, and the glass shattered beneath him, a burst of jagged shards that cut into his skin as he fell. He landed hard, breath knocked from his lungs, in a space that reeked of damp earth and decay, a basement, stone walls slick with mold, the air thick and suffocating. The mirror hung before him, ornate and alive, its frame writhing with eyeless faces, its surface rippling like a heartbeat. His reflection stared back, normal at first, then blinked, its grin splitting wide, black eyes glinting. "You're home," it said, stepping out, shard in hand, its movements fluid where his were frantic. Ethan scrambled back, the hum surging, the walls pulsing, and the reflection lunged, shards slashing the air. He dodged, grabbing a rusted pipe from the floor, and swung, the metal connecting with its skull. It dissolved into smoke, reforming behind him, and drove the shard into his side. Pain exploded, light pouring from the wound, and the reflection shrieked, the basement trembling, the walls bleeding ichor. Ethan tore at his chest, breaking the fracture wider, blood and light spilling out, the hum fracturing into static. The mass surged from the mirror, tendrils lashing, mouth snapping, but he pushed deeper, light swallowing the room, the reflection, the mass. The world dissolved, and he woke in the yard, sprawled in the mud, the rain pounding down. The house loomed behind him, intact, its windows dark, the hum silent. His chest bled, the fracture raw but sealed, light flickering faintly. He staggered to his feet, the rain washing the blood away, and limped away, the street stretching before him, the town quiet. He didn't go back, couldn't, not to his mother, not to the house. The hum waited, buried deep, and he felt it, the mass, the hunger bleeding through him, through the world. Days blurred into weeks, Ethan drifting from town to town, avoiding mirrors, avoiding glass. The fracture pulsed, bleeding beneath his skin, the hum buzzing faintly, a whisper he couldn't silence. He slept in alleys, in abandoned buildings, the reflections following, in broken windows and puddles, in the shine of strangers' eyes, all grinning, all waiting. He tore at himself, light flaring, driving them back, but they always returned, patient and eternal. One night, in a derelict warehouse, the hum roared, the walls trembling, cracks splitting the concrete. The mirror appeared, full length and alive, its reflection stepping out, shard glowing red. "You're the glass," it hissed, and the mass surged, swallowing the room, the world. Ethan tore at his chest, light flaring, but the hum drowned it, the mass wrapping around him, its mouths whispering, "You're us." He fell, the world dissolving, and woke on the black glass again, the void above, the hum silent. The fracture bled, light flickering, and he stood, the glass stretching endlessly. The hum pulsed once, then twice, a heartbeat growing stronger, and the shadows shifted, the mass appearing, not behind him, not above, but within him, reflected in the glass, grinning through his eyes. He clawed at his face, tearing at the fracture, light pouring out, but the mass laughed, its voice his own. "You can't break me," it rasped, and the glass pulsed, the void surging, swallowing him whole. He didn't wake this time, just fell endlessly, the hum roaring, the fracture bleeding, the hunger breathing through him. Ethan didn't hit bottom. There was no bottom to hit. The void swallowed him, an endless descent through shadow and silence. The hum a roar that vibrated through his bones, sinking with the fracture in his chest. It bled now, not just light but something thicker, darker, or black and alive, seeping from the crack he'd torn wider, feeding the darkness around him. The mass was there, not separate, not outside, but in him, its mouths whispering his name, its grins splitting his reflection in the black glass that stretched beneath him, above him, everywhere. He flailed, hands grasping at nothing, the hum drowning his screams, the fracture pulsing with every beat of his heart. The glass pulsed too, reflecting not just him but the world he'd lost, streets, houses, people, all warped, all grinning, all bleeding into the mask that wore his face. His mother's eyeless smile flickered past, the old man's jagged grin, the imposter's shard glinting red, and Ethan understood. He wasn't falling through the void. The void was falling through him. "You're us," the chorus rasped, 1,000 voices threading through the hum, and the glass cracked, fissures racing outward, core pouring up, wrapping around his limbs. He clawed at his chest, nails digging into the fracture, light flaring briefly, but the ichor surged, smothering it, pulling him deeper. The mass laughed, its voice his own, layered with the trapped, the devoured, the awake. "You fed us." He tore harder, breaking himself wider, blood and ichor spilling out, the hum fracturing into static, but wasn't enough. The glass pulsed, the void thickened, and the mass emerged, not as tendrils, not as flesh, but as him, hundreds of Ethans, all grinning, all bleeding, all reaching. They didn't attack, didn't chase. Just stood there, a mirror of his fracture, their black eyes glinting with hunger. "You're the fall," they said in unison, and the glass shattered beneath him, a burst of shards that cut into his skin as he plummeted. He landed in water, black icy, endless, his body sinking, the current dragging him down. He kicked, lungs burning, but the surface was gone, replaced by a ceiling of glass reflecting the mass, its mouth gaping, its eyes blinking. His mother floated beside him, eyeless, grinning, her hand wrapping around his ankle. "Stay," she whispered, her voice bubbling through the water, and the others joined, strangers, souls he didn't know, all grinning, all pulling. He thrashed, breaking free, and broke the surface, gasping, in a cavern, stone walls towering into darkness, the floor a sea of cracked glass, the air thick with the stench of rot. The mirror hung before him, its frame alive with eyeless faces, its surface rippling like a heartbeat. His reflection stared back, shard in hand, grinning wider than ever. "You're home," it said, stepping out, the hum surging, the walls pulsing. Ethan scrambled back, grabbing a shard from the floor, its edges biting into his palm. The reflection lunged, shards slashing, and he parried, the glass clashing with a sound like breaking bones. Light flared from his chest, the fracture bleeding, and the reflection shrieked, dissolving into smoke, reforming behind him. It drove its shard into his back, pain exploding, light pouring out, and the cavern trembled, the mass surging from the mirror, tendrils lashing, mouth snapping. He tore at his chest, breaking the fracture wider, blood and light spilling out, the hum fracturing into static. The mass recoiled, its screams deafening, and Ethan pushed deeper, light swallowing the cavern, the reflection, the mass. The world dissolved, and he woke on a road, sprawled in the rain, the hum silent, the fracture raw but sealed, light flickering faintly. The town stretched before him, quiet, intact, the houses dark, the streetlights steady. He staggered to his feet, blood soaking his clothes, and limped forward, the rain washing the ichor away. He didn't know where he was, didn't care. Just walked, the hum buried deep, the fracture pulsing. The reflections followed, in windows and puddles. All his own, all still, but he felt them watching, waiting. Weeks blurred, Ethan drifting, the hum buzzing faintly, the fracture bleeding beneath his skin. He avoided mirrors, slept in shadows, tore at himself when the grins returned, like driving them back. Until one night, in a motel room, the hum roared, the walls trembling, cracks splitting the ceiling. The mirror appeared, full length and alive, its reflection stepping out, shard glowing red. "You're the feed," it hissed, and the mass surged, swallowing the room, the world. Ethan tore at his chest, light flaring, but the hum drowned it, the mass wrapping around him, its mouths whispering, "You're us." He fell, the world dissolving, and woke on the black glass, the void above, the hum roaring. A fracture bled, ichor now, not light, and the mass grinned through his eyes, its hunger his own. He stood, the glass stretching endlessly, and the hum pulsed, a heartbeat growing stronger. The shadows shifted, the mass within him, and he felt it, the fall, the feed, the door he'd become. He didn't fight, didn't tear, just walked, the glass pulsing, the void breathing, the hunger feeding through him, endless and awake. Ethan didn't stop walking. The black glass stretched beneath him, infinite and unyielding, its surface rippling with every step, reflecting not the void above but the hunger within him, the mass, its mouth gaping, its grin splitting wide, its eyes glinting through his own. The hum roared, a constant pulse that synced with the fracture in his chest, bleeding ichor now, thick and black, seeping from the crack he'd torn too wide to close. He was the door, the feed, the fall, and now the walk, a vessel for the thing that breathed through him. The void churned above, shadows twisting, tendrils dripping down like tar, but they didn't touch him, not anymore. They didn't need to. The mass was in him, its hunger his own, a weight that pressed against his skull, his bones, his soul. The hum clarified, splitting into voices, his mother, the old man, the chorus of the trapped, all whispering, "You're us," and he didn't fight it, didn't tear at himself, didn't scream. He just walked, the glass pulsing, the void breathing, the hunger feeding. Time meant nothing here. Minutes, hours, years blurred into a single, endless stride. The fracture bled, ichor pooling around his feet, and the glass drank it, cracks splitting outward, reflecting the world he'd lost. Streets, houses, people, all warped, all grinning, all swallowed by the mask that wore his face. His mother's eyeless smile flickered past, the old man's jagged grin, the imposter's shard glinting red, and Ethan felt it. Connection, the thread, the piece of him that wasn't him anymore, walking with him through him. The glass pulsed, and the void parted, revealing a horizon, a faint, sickly light, red and throbbing, like a wound in the darkness. Ethan walked toward it, the hum surging, the fracture bleeding faster, ichor dripping from his hands, his chest, his eyes. The light grew, a tear in the void, and the glass cracked beneath him, splitting wide, the mass surging up, not to drag him down, but to lift him, tendrils wrapping around him, mouths whispering his name. He stepped through the tear, the light blinding, the hum roaring, and landed on pavement, wet, cracked, familiar. The town stretched before him, the same town he'd fled, its houses dark, its streets empty, the rain pounding down. The hum fell silent, the fracture sealed but bleeding beneath his skin, ichor mixing with the water, staining the road black. He stood, chest heaving, and looked around. The reflections were everywhere, in windows, in puddles, in the shine of a parked car, all his own, all grinning, all bleeding. "You're back," a voice rasped, wet and guttural, and Ethan turned. The imposter stood under a streetlight, shard in hand, its grin splitting wide, its black eyes glinting. The hum buzzed faintly, a whisper in the rain, and the imposter stepped closer, the pavement trembling, cracks splitting outward, core seeping up. "You brought us," it said, its voice his own, layered with a chorus, and the shadows stretched, the mass surging from the cracks, swallowing the street. Ethan didn't run, didn't fight. He felt it, the hunger, the mass bleeding through him, through the world. He walked toward the imposter, the fracture pulsing, ichor pouring out, and the reflection laughed, raising the shard. "You're the walk," it hissed, and drove the blade into his chest, right into the fracture. Pain exploded, ichor surging, and a mass roared, tendrils lashing, mouth snapping, but Ethan didn't fall. He grabbed the shard, pulling it deeper, breaking himself wider, ichor and light spilling out, not to fight, but to feed. The imposter shrieked, dissolving into smoke, the mass surging higher, swallowing the town, the rain, the night. The hum roared, the world dissolving, and Ethan walked through it, the fracture bleeding, the hunger breathing, the mass growing. Houses pulsed, windows shattered, reflections merged, hundreds, thousands, all him, all grinning, all feeding. He didn't stop. The town fell away, the roads stretching endlessly, the mass walking with him, through him. Cities loomed, their skyscrapers bending, their glass reflecting the hunger, the grins, the ichor. People screamed, their reflections shifting, joining the mass, feeding it. Ethan walked, The fracture bleeding, the hum roaring, the world unraveling, streets, forests, oceans, all swallowed by the mass, the hunger, the door he'd become. The old man's voice whispered, faint and final, "You can't stop it." Ethan didn't try. He felt it. The mass, the hunger, the walk, endless, eternal, awake. The glass pulsed beneath him, the void above, and he walked, the fracture bleeding, the hum breathing, the hunger feeding. The world was gone, the reflections gone, but he remained, the door, the feed, the fall, the walk, grinning through the cracks, feeding the void forever.